Chapter 220. Damn you. Wasn't this the girl in the hall who was as popular as the ninth princess? At first, Qin Feng had been affected by her peerless beauty, so he hadn't noticed it. But now that he looked carefully, he was sure that the woman in front of him was the woman in the hall. Perhaps the environment was different, so the feeling she gave off was different. But appearances couldn't lie. "I'm sorry, I barged in by mistake." Qin Feng apologized and turned to leave. However, right at this moment, the woman spoke. Her voice was clear and melodious, and carried a hint of immaturity. It was like a gentle breeze brushing past one's heart, like the murmuring of flowing water. It was extremely beautiful. But soon, Qin Feng's face darkened. This sentence directly destroyed her fairy-like cold temperament, and also destroyed her charm. "Handsome big brother, can you come and help me?" Her voice was crisp and clear, but it was pure and innocent. It was completely different from the cold and aloof voice in the hall, but it belonged to the woman in the crowd. It was as if he had not been affected by the secular world and was unbelievably pure. "I'm sorry, I still have something to do." Qin Feng apologized and planned to leave. He guessed that this woman might have deliberately pretended to be like this to deceive him. Although he didn't know what he had that was worth the other party using such a trick to deceive him, who had always been cautious, felt that it was better to leave as soon as possible. "Handsome big brother, I'm locked up. Can you help me release it?" The woman's voice was soft and gentle. Qin Feng wanted to refuse, but the moment their eyes met, his heartstrings were suddenly plucked. An indescribably complex feeling welled up in his heart, causing him to unconsciously walk over. The woman's legs were shackled by a golden chain, which was covered with purple, veined patterns. It looked somewhat mysterious. Qin Feng used all of his strength, but was unable to break it. In the end, he took out his stone axe and cut it off. After getting rid of the bondage, the girl immediately jumped up in joy, like a happy little rabbit. The entire courtyard was filled with the crisp sound of silver bells. "Handsome big brother, I'm hungry." Just as Qin Feng was about to leave, the corner of his shirt was suddenly pulled. At the same time, the young girl's pleading voice could be heard. He turned around and looked at those big watery eyes. They were blinking, and he really couldn't bear to refuse. Originally, he wanted to take her out for a meal, but Qin Feng always felt that the whole thing was strange. Fortunately, he directly found a kitchen nearby, waited for her to eat, and quickly left. "Yes, it's really delicious." The girl's mouth was greasy, which didn't match her image at all. "Handsome big brother, what's your name?" The girl raised her head and asked. "Hurry up and eat. I'll leave once I'm full," Qin said helplessly. He was very depressed. This young girl was too much of a scammer. She was so afraid that he would leave that she would even use one of her hands to grab onto the corner of his clothes while eating. At the same time, he was also very irritated. He didn't know why, but he always had an indescribably complicated feeling towards this young girl who was as innocent as a piece of white paper. He also couldn't figure out why he had this feeling, as if there was some kind of connection between them that couldn't be broken. "Handsome big brother, my name is Lucio Deceives the Frost," the young girl said innocently. Hearing this, the depressed Qin Feng's expression suddenly froze, and he looked at her in astonishment. "Lucio Deceives the Frost." Qin Feng was startled and subconsciously asked, "That Lucio of the Protector of the Nations, Grand General Lucio Shenba?" "Yes." The young girl nodded. "He's my father." Qin Feng almost jumped up. He looked at her strangely, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. The Protector of the Nations, Grand General, the Lucio family, was the #1 family in the imperial capital. Their status and power were comparable to the imperial family, and they had a supreme position in the imperial capital. It could be said that they were second only to one person and above tens of thousands. Moreover, it was said that the Protector of the Nations, Grand General Lucio Shenba, and the Emperor of the imperial capital were playmates since young. After they grew up, they fought for the empire in all directions, resisting the beast race, and made illustrious military achievements. Even the emperor called him a brother, and his status was shockingly high. Yet, the daughter of such a family was actually chained up and starved. How is this possible? "Handsome big brother, you don't believe me?" The young girl could see that Qin Feng didn't believe her. I believe you. Qin Feng nodded. If he hadn't met her in the hall, he definitely wouldn't have believed her. However, he was puzzled as to why Lucio deceives the frost would lie to him. However, since she didn't say anything, he didn't ask. Some things were better left unclear. If he really wanted to get to the bottom of it, he was afraid that it would involve things that he couldn't face. After Lucio deceives the frost finished eating, Qin Feng planned to leave. Handsome big brother, are you leaving? Lucio deceives the frost asked in a low voice. Yes. Qin Feng nodded. Are we friends? She asked weakly. Qin Feng was astonished. You're the daughter of the National Protector General. Are you worried that you don't have friends? Hearing Qin Feng's words, Lucio deceives the frost's mouth curved into a self-deprecating smile. She bitterly said, although I'm noble, other than my family, I don't have a single friend that I can talk to. Everyone is afraid of me. They don't dare to make friends with me. Even if they occasionally meet me, they will hide far away. Handsome big brother, do you know what it's like to be looked at as if everyone is looking at a monster? It's like being abandoned by the entire world. Do you know what it's like to be alone in the endless cold darkness? Qin Feng was speechless. She was playing the sympathy card. He knew that Lucio deceives the frost was deliberately lying to him, but he didn't point it out. He said, yes, it's very lonely. Then are you willing to be my first friend? Lucio deceives the frost asked nervously. Qin Feng silently looked at her. The other party could pretend, but he couldn't. He really admired her. The two of them had just met in the main hall. How could she still pretend like this? If it was the first time they met, he might have been deceived by her weak appearance and doe-like eyes. Seeing that Qin Feng didn't say anything, Lucio deceives the frost lowered her head as if she was sobbing. She said in a low voice, since I was born, apart from my family, you are the only one who is willing to get along with me. And I always have a special feeling for you. Okay, I'm willing to be your friend. Qin Feng vaguely replied. He just wanted to get rid of her as soon as possible. Really? Lucio deceives the frost happily opened her eyes. That kind of joy, at least in Qin Feng's eyes, was definitely not fake. Sure enough, women are naturally good at pretending. Qin Feng sighed in his heart. In short, he definitely couldn't pretend to be so real. I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first. Let's meet again another day. Okay. Lucio deceives the frost happily nodded, but then said, handsome big brother, can you let me see that axe? Qin Feng handed over the stone axe. Handsome big brother, look at this jade of mine. Lucio deceives the frost took the stone axe, then took off a white jade pendant from her neck and handed it to Qin Feng. Qin Feng took it and looked at the white jade. The white jade was slightly transparent, and the inside was shining. He didn't understand jade, but he knew that this was definitely a priceless item. The market price of this jade is estimated to be worth at least. At this point, Qin Feng suddenly stopped. His eyes were dull, and his whole body was stiff. Lucio Qishuang's figure was nowhere to be seen. She had disappeared along with her stone axe. Chapter 2:21. Eerie Horror. Damn you. Qin Feng cursed in a low voice. He knew that he had been careless and had fallen into a trap at the last moment. The stone axe was his trump card. He had discovered it together with the water god technique and the divine power disc. Although it had no other use besides suppressing spiritual energy, Qin Feng believed that it was definitely not an ordinary item. Now it had been cheated. I'm afraid that even this name and identity were fabricated. Qin Feng was furious. This was too much. He searched the vicinity, but did not find Lucio deceives the frost. He returned to the main hall and wanted to ask the ninth princess for help. After all, that woman's status was not low. The ninth princess should know her. Damn, he actually dares to come back here. Does he think that the most dangerous place is the safest? Qin Feng was agitated. Unexpectedly, Lucio deceives the frost, who had cheated him of his stone axe, had returned here. He walked over with a calm face. Because of the two princes and the ninth princess, his appearance immediately became the center of attention. He attracted most of the people's attention. Why did this guy come back? Someone whispered. The direction he's walking in seems to be her. Qin Feng, what's wrong with you? Seeing that something was wrong with Qin Feng, the ninth princess immediately walked over. I'm looking for her. Don't stop me. Qin Feng bypassed the ninth princess and walked directly to Lucio Deceives the Frost. Standing in front of her, Qin Feng was looking down at her coldly from above. This scene stunned and surprised countless people. This guy's head had been kicked. He dared to look down on her like this? Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, being stared at by Qin Feng like this. Even with Lucio Deceives the Frost cold temperament, she could not help but feel a bit unnatural. Her eyebrows tightened and she said indifferently, "Do you have something to say? Don't you know whether I'm fine or not?" Seeing Lucio Deceives the Frost's cold face, Qin Feng was furious. He sat down directly in front of her and looked directly at her. Then, he suddenly leaned closer and said playfully, We're already so familiar with each other. There's no need to pretend that we don't know each other." Qin Feng looked at her with a smile, deliberately making the word familiar sound very ambiguous. Everyone's eyes suddenly widened. Even the ninth princess's eyes were wide open. When did Qin Feng know her? It seemed that the two of them were very familiar with each other. However, she had checked and found that Qin Feng had never had any contact with the Lucio family. Lucio Deceives the Frost was obviously confused by Qin Feng. Even she, who had always been cold and aloof, was stunned at this moment. She didn't know how to respond. After a long time, she took a deep breath. Her beautiful eyes were filled with an inexplicable chill. "Do you think that you can act so recklessly just because you're little Nine's savior?" "Ha ha." Qin Feng smiled and said, "I don't know if I'm acting recklessly or not, but I know that you're really good at pretending. You even change your clothes in such a short time. However, I'm very curious. How did you have the courage to come here? Did you think that I wouldn't come looking for you?" Lucio Deceives the Frost narrowed her beautiful eyes and stared at Qin Feng indifferently. Her eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Qin Feng looked at her without fear. "You'd better make yourself clear. Otherwise, you'll know that no one can save you today." After a long time, Lucio Deceives the Frost said coldly. Qin Feng raised his eyebrows. If he hadn't been in the right, he might have been intimidated. He didn't waste any time. He threw the white jade on the table and said, "The words Lucio are engraved on the back of this jade. If you say that this doesn't belong to the Lucio family, then take it that I'm being unreasonable. There's more." Qin Feng threw the golden purple lock that he had picked up earlier on the table and said, "You pretended to be ignorant and naive. You tricked me into using the stone axe to help you, but you took it away. Don't you think that's a little too much?" Qin Feng looked at her coldly. However, he realized that her face had turned pale in an instant. Her eyes were filled with panic and horror. He frowned slightly. Even if she had been exposed, she didn't have to have such a big reaction. Where did this come from? Lucio Deceives the Frost stared at the white jade and golden purple lock on the table and asked in a trembling voice. Qin Feng frowned even more. At a certain moment, he suddenly realized that the atmosphere in the hall had changed abruptly after he took out these two items. It was dead silent and seemed to be overly oppressive. He turned his head and realized that the ninth princess's face had also turned pale. Even Xianyuan Owl, who had always been calm, had an extremely unnatural expression on his face. It was as if he had encountered something extremely terrifying. Qin Feng's heart suddenly trembled. He looked straight into Lucio Deceives the Frost's eyes. In the next moment, his heart trembled. He said in a low voice, "You're not her?" At this moment, he suddenly understood that the Lucio Deceives the Frost in front of him was definitely not the Lucio Deceives the Frost who had stolen his stone axe. "Today is?" Xianyuan Owl slowly raised his head. His line of sight seemed to penetrate the cover of the roof and looked at the full moon in the sky. He suddenly lost his voice and said, "Today is the night of the full moon. Quick, summon the Imperial Guards." He and the seventh prince, Xianyuan, Mao's expression instantly changed. They hurriedly walked out. The quiet hall suddenly became chaotic. Qin Feng could clearly feel that these people were afraid. It was as if something terrible was about to happen. "What's going on?" Qin Feng asked the ninth princess in a low voice. You might have caused a disaster." The ninth princess's voice was slightly trembling. Just as everyone was about to run out, Xin Yuan Owl and Xin Yuan Mao suddenly retreated slowly. While everyone was astonished, a familiar figure that made Qin Feng tense suddenly walked in step by step. This is Lucio Deceives the Frost. At this moment, Qin Feng's eyes fiercely shrank. The Lucio Deceives the Frost who had just walked in was completely different from the one he had seen before. Now, she was calm and expressionless. Her eyes were empty and silent. She walked in like a puppet, but she gave people a strange feeling. The atmosphere in the hall was about to freeze. This was just a feeling, but Qin Feng was sure that this lively, cheerful, and naive Lucio Deceives the Frost had now become extremely dangerous. From the panicked expressions on the two princes' faces, one could see a thing or two. Sai Shui. Lucio Deceives the Frost cried out in alarm. Her beautiful eyes were filled with desolation and grief. Don't go over. She's in danger now. Qin Feng stopped her. His expression was extremely solemn. Bang! Some people wanted to go behind her and leave, but the doors suddenly closed without any warning. It was extremely strange. Everyone retreated backward, their bodies trembling. Thump! Suddenly, there seemed to be the sound of a heartbeat. This was a soundless heartbeat, but it could be clearly felt. Thump! 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 The soundless heartbeat was beating faster and faster. At first, it was beating every 10 seconds, but now it was less than a second. At a certain moment, Qin Feng was shocked to find that this soundless heartbeat was actually synchronizing with his own heartbeat. It was as if he had been brought into that rhythm. His heartbeat kept accelerating. Buzz! Suddenly, an invisible wave spread out from her body. In a trance, there seemed to be an extremely sorrowful roar. This wave was invisible and colorless, but quickly spread out. In an instant, Qin Feng stood in front of Lucio Deceives the Frost and the ninth princess. His body shook violently, as if he had suffered a heavy blow. Flowers of blood bloomed on his body. At the same time, most of the people in the hall were seriously injured and fell to the ground. Many of them directly fell unconscious. Pucci! Qin Feng spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned pale. If not for his clothes, one could see that the surface of his body was covered with cracks. His expression was slightly sluggish. That was because his spirit had suffered a serious blow. Qin Feng had suffered an unprecedented injury. He was on the verge of death. Even his spirit was about to dry up. Chapter 222. Look at each other. Qin Feng, how are you? The ninth princess's expression changed. I'm fine. Qin Feng waved his hand and walked towards Lucio Sai Shui, leaving bloody footprints in his wake. Although he knew that his actions were undoubtedly courting death, for some reason, he suddenly felt a sense of excitement. This feeling surpassed the suppression of reason and even controlled his body as he walked towards Lucio Sai Shui. He knew that he could stop it, but he just didn't want to. Finally, he arrived in front of Lucio Sai Shui and looked at her with a burning gaze. It's time for you to wake up, Qin Feng said in a low voice. Lucio Sai Shui's delicate body trembled slightly. She turned her head mechanically and looked at Qin Feng. A faint scarlet color suddenly spread from the corners of her eyes. Why? Why did you lock me up? Lucio Sai Shui slowly spat out an empty and lifeless voice. No one wants to lock you up, it's just bang. Before Qin Feng could finish his words, he suddenly paused. His pupils suddenly dilated, and his mind instantly went into a trance. He only regained his senses when the ninth princess screamed. Qin Feng slowly lowered his head. His pupils abruptly shrank as a lotus root-like jade arm appeared on his chest. At this moment, blood was sputtering out from the fair jade arm. Qin Feng stared blankly at this scene, and his mind went blank for a moment. Lucio Sai Shui's arm directly pierced through his chest. The ninth princess and Lucio Deceives the Frost cried out in alarm, and their jade-like hands couldn't help but cover their red lips. Qin Feng. The ninth princess's eyes widened as she looked at this scene in disbelief. Cough, cough, cough. Qin Feng coughed up large mouthfuls of blood, but a crazed look flashed in his eyes. He grabbed the arm that was pulled out from his body and shouted, Take everyone and leave this place. Xin Yuan Owl was the first to react. He hurriedly ordered people to take the unconscious people out of the hall. The ninth princess was dragged out by Xin Yuan Owl in a daze. Her eyes were fixed on Qin Feng's chest. There was a bloody hole the size of a fist there. It was empty and looked a little horrifying. After everyone left, Qin Feng's eyes suddenly burst with a dazzling light. At this moment, he could no longer suppress it. A power that he had never felt before surged up in his body, and he almost couldn't help but roar towards the sky. At the instant when Lucio Saishue's arm pierced through his chest, he finally understood why he had such a special feeling. It was as if there was some sort of connection between them. Now, he knew that it was the demonic eye. There was an extremely mysterious and powerful power in Lucio Saishue's body. This power was controlling her, but this power resonated with the demonic eye from a distance. Wong. A vertical eye opened at the center of Lucio Saishue's brows. The vertical eye was blood red and shrouded in dark mist. It caused Qin Feng to freeze instantly. There was also a demonic eye on Lucio Saishue's body. His heart trembled. He was too familiar with this eye. It was exactly the same as the demonic eye. The ice-cold feeling was exactly the same. Old devil, wake up quickly. If you don't wake up, I'm going to die. Qin Feng called out in his heart. If he knew that there was a demonic eye on Lucio Saishue's body, he would have run far away, no matter what. How could he not have imagined that the strange feeling he had came from the resonance of the two demonic eyes? He had experienced how terrifying this thing was. Now he could only hope that the demonic eye could sense the call and quickly wake up to deal with this demonic eye. Otherwise, he would definitely die. Chi! A beam of black light shot out from between Lucio Saishue's eyebrows and shot into Qin Feng's palm. At the same time, his palm trembled as the two forces blended together, whistling and surging in midair. Vaguely, the black light outlined a strange pattern, spinning at high speed like a top. Roar! Screech! There seemed to be an endless, violent, and ferocious sound that surged out along with the pattern. Waves of mysterious energy spread out and fell. It was repairing Qin Feng's injured body. His body that was full of cracks was recovering rapidly. The cracks were disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The energy was too powerful. It was as if it had cleansed his entire body and removed all the impurities. Boom! Qin Feng's body trembled violently. This diagram entered his body as a surge of boundless might gushed forth. The pattern surged in his body, and a vast power spread out. Wong. Various sounds could be heard. Then, dragons and tigers rose, and various auspicious divine beasts appeared. Roars could be heard endlessly. All the cracks on Qin Feng's body disappeared. Furthermore, the bloody hole in his chest was also recovering rapidly. Flesh began to grow from the hole in his chest. In less than a moment, it was completely healed. The two demonic eyes looked at each other and activated a mysterious energy. It directly repaired him from a near-death state to his peak. Even his flesh was surging. Every piece of flesh was emitting a sparkling light. When they collided with each other, there was the crisp sound of pearls falling on a jade plate. His blood was boiling, and there were traces of faint red blood vapors that were evaporating. His blood was being refined. The impurities in his blood were evaporated, and his spirituality was activated. His bones were vibrating. It went deep into his bone marrow and also tempered the impurities in his bones. Qin Feng was excited. The light in his eyes shone brightly. He stabilized his mind and entered a special state. It was as if his mind was wandering. It was very similar to the first time he opened the inheritance of the 5 dragons. His eyes were tightly shut. Divine dragons circled around him. If one counted carefully, there were exactly 5 of them. They surged with energy and poured into his body. This scene was too terrifying. Although it was illusory, the feeling and the pressure seemed to be transmitted from the illusory to reality. Qin Feng's face gradually flushed. There was a faint, bloody aura that was evaporating from his pores. At first, the blood color was very thick, but it gradually faded. This was the process of blood evolution. It removed the impurities in the human blood. The lighter the blood color, the less impurities were removed. When it became colorless, it symbolized that his blood had fully evolved. Blood derived from bone marrow. This also meant that his root bone had been precipitated to the point of perfection. Gradually, this scene disappeared. The pattern of black light also disappeared. The hall returned to normal. At this time, Qin Feng's eyelids twitched. His originally pale face regained its rosy glow. His whole body flickered with a sparkling light. He was like an unpolished jade, sparkling and translucent. Even his hair was sparkling and translucent. This was a comprehensive sublimation. His physical strength was strengthened again. He had taken another step forward in the completion of the late stage of the bone-strengthening realm. He was only half a step away from the spirit communication realm. The blood in his body gradually calmed down. It flowed in his meridians and emitted a faint, sparkling radiance. Finally, everything disappeared. The radiance faded, and Qin Feng returned to normal. He opened his eyes. There was a wisp of white light hovering in his eyes before it dissipated. What a pity! Qin Feng sighed with slight disappointment as he exhaled a mouthful of white air. As the resonance of the two demonic eyes disappeared, his strange state also disappeared. His understanding of the divine dragon technique was not deep. However, he was not discouraged. After all, his understanding of the divine dragon technique had deepened. More importantly, his strength had increased again. He had reached the point of perfection in the bone-strengthening realm. What's going on with her? Why does she have a demonic eye? Qin Feng looked at Lucio Saishua, whose eyes were tightly shut. At this moment, the demonic eye between her eyebrows had disappeared. Chapter 223. Prepare for war. Not long after, Lucio Saishua opened her eyes. Her big, empty eyes were filled with dense spiritual energy, and she had returned to normal. "Handsome big brother," she exclaimed in surprise. "Looks like she doesn't remember anything." Qin Feng muttered in his heart, but on the surface, he still smiled at her. This was the Lucio family's secret, so he'd better not delve into it. "Your sister and the others are outside. Let's go out." Before going out, he took back his stone axe. When he asked for the reason, he was speechless. She took his stone axe and left the white jade behind because she wanted to see him again and was worried that he would run away. At the same time, it was also a memento. Although he felt helpless, Qin Feng could also understand why she said that. With his kind of mysterious and unknown power, once she lost control, she would become a murderous monster. Fortunately, he was born in a big family. Otherwise, he would have been killed long ago. At this moment, he also understood that Lucio Saishua was not lying when she said that she had special feelings for him. It was because of the devil eye. As for why she also had the demon eye, he didn't want to ask. After thinking about it, Qin Feng took out a spirit stone. This was a type of cultivation medicine. He engraved his name on it and handed it to her. He smiled and said, "Here, this is for you. In the future, when you're lonely, take it out and take a look. No matter what, there will always be a friend who cares about you." Lucio Saishua blinked her big eyes as mist rose from them. "You are really willing to be my friend? You're not afraid of me?" Qin Feng sighed in his heart as he looked at her perturbed expression. Even though the little girl did not say anything, she understood in her heart why no one was willing to get close to her. He understood the loneliness of being doted on. Even if he lived under the sun, his heart was still in darkness. He wanted to open his heart and let people in, but no one stepped in. This was the most glorious kind of sorrow. No matter where or when you are, I sincerely wish you a good life. Even if you don't have anyone by your side, you have to live well, because you're not alone. In this world, there are people who have the same experience as you, but no matter what, they will live well. Do you understand? Qin Feng said seriously. Lucio Saishua nodded her head as if she understood. "I could feel your loneliness from the very beginning. That's why I thought we could become good friends. We're the same kind of people." Qin Feng was startled, looking at her blankly. Then he understood. Perhaps because they had the same attribute, they could sometimes sense each other's inner thoughts. I didn't expect that the one who understands me the most is a little girl whom I've only met twice. Qin Feng smiled bitterly in his heart. Here, this is for you. With a flip of Lucio Saishue's hand, a radiance flickered and a black and white roulette appeared in her hand. Qin Feng looked over and focused slightly. The roulette was only the size of a palm and was divided into two colors, black and white. It was very old and simple, as if it carried with it the scent of time, exuding a sense of age. He weighed it in his hand. It wasn't heavy, about 3 or 4 kilograms. What is this? He asked. I don't know either. Lucio Saishue shook her head. Her big eyes flickered and she suddenly whispered, Don't tell anyone. My father said that he found it in a cave in the 100,000 Bear Mountains. Don't judge it by its ugly appearance. I treasure it very much. Qin Feng frowned slightly. This should be an antique. The fact that a godly existence like Lucio Shenba could bring it back was enough to prove that it wasn't simple. All right. Qin Feng nodded. He originally wanted to refuse, but his intuition told him that this item might be of great use to him. He was now too sensitive to things that were black and white. Why do I feel like a bad uncle who seduces an ignorant girl? Qin Feng muttered softly in his heart. However, his movements were very nimble as he immediately put it away. No matter what, even if he was discovered by the Lucio family in the future, he would have a reason. He had saved many people today, including their family's second young mistress. It was only right for him to take something as a reward. He brought Lucio Saishue out. At this moment, there were already many people outside. Most of them were soldiers wearing ice-cold armor. There were also a few obscure, yet powerful auras in the dark. Lucio deceives the frost, the ninth princess, Xin Yuan Owl, and the others walked over. Qin Feng, what happened to you? The ninth princess looked at him in shock. The others were also slightly stunned. At that time, they had personally seen Qin Feng being severely injured. There was a big hole in his chest, and he was close to dying. Why was he completely fine now? That was just an illusion. We were caught in an illusion, Qin Feng replied vaguely. He didn't dare to let anyone know the truth. He had suffered such serious injuries, yet he had completely recovered in such a short time. If this news were to spread, wouldn't he be used as a lab rat for research? The others looked at him strangely. Was the scene just now really an illusion? All right, her problem has been solved. The trouble she caused has also been quelled. I'll take my leave now. Qin Feng clapped his hands and smiled at everyone. Then he left. The ninth princess was stunned. She stared blankly at Qin Feng's back as he left. Lucio deceives the frost's beautiful eyes flickered with a strange luster. She stared at Qin Feng. No one knew what she was thinking. Xin Yuan Owl and Xin Yuan Mao frowned. They silently glanced in the direction where Qin Feng left. Both of their gazes turned deep. It was already past midnight when he returned to his residence. Qin Feng contacted the demonic eye several times, but there was no response. He clearly felt the two demonic eyes resonating just now. Why was there no response at all? The demonic eye continued to sleep. He didn't know whether to be happy or worried. There were only a few months left until the 3-year agreement. At that time, the devil contract would also take effect. His body would be replaced by the demonic eye, and his consciousness would probably disappear. He didn't know if he could deal with the demonic eye with his current strength, but he estimated that he couldn't. Saint Ryuin has a 9th heavenly realm expert. Can he get the demonic eye out of my body? He whispered. He felt that this method was feasible. Anyway, the demonic eye was still asleep. Even if it didn't succeed, it wouldn't matter. I'll get rid of you today. However, after he got up, he suddenly stopped. Thinking of all the things that happened before the demonic eye fell asleep, he felt a little reluctant. Forget it. I'll take one step at a time. In the end, he gave up looking for a Saint Ryuin expert. As he expected, last night's matter was tightly sealed. There was no news at all. It was as if nothing had happened. In the past 2 days, the Lucio family sent people to contact him several times. In the end, they were all rejected by him because he was focused on preparing for the king-conferring battle. He naturally knew what the Lucio family was thinking. However, the demonic eye was too important. He didn't want to casually come into contact with such a family. Moreover, the king-conferring battle was coming. He didn't have time to think about anything else. He had to prepare for it. Chapter 2:24. Heavenly King descends the next day. The sky was blue and cloudless. The sunlight was warm, but not blazing hot. Occasionally, a gentle breeze would blow past, taking away the hustle and bustle of the city, causing one to involuntarily feel refreshed. Ever since the first ray of sunlight broke through the shackles of the earth and shone on this city with a long history, the quiet streets gradually began to become lively. Today was destined to be the busiest day of the year in the imperial capital. This was because the martial competition of the king-conferring ceremony, which had gathered everyone's attention, would reach its most exciting climax today. The 8 powerhouses had already displayed their astonishing strength to everyone in the previous rounds of the competition. And today, the 8 powerhouses born from these thousands of people would engage in a most eye-catching clash with the 8 heavenly kings that countless youths looked up to. And because of this, the number of people gathered in the square today was almost full. That was because not all of the onlookers were from the imperial capital. Many of them were from outside the city. The Heavenly King Challenge was a battle between 8 top students of St. Ryuin and 8 of the strongest youths in the imperial capital. In a sense, this was the true confrontation between St. Ryuin and the imperial capital. St. Ryuin was the faith of all the primitive slaves. They naturally wanted to witness this battle with their own eyes. The faith in their hearts was not any weaker than that in the imperial capital. Looking at those hopeful and eager eyes, Qin Feng finally understood why the St. Ryuin would rather risk their lives and send them instead of losing face. This was because not only did it concern the St. Ryuin's reputation, but it also concerned whether there was any power in the entire primitive land that could rival the imperial capital. They might not win this battle, but they had to fight with their own spirit, fight for their own unyielding life, and give some comfort to those who were still struggling in the sea of bitterness, so that they could still see hope. The students of St. Ryuin were still considered slaves under the slavery system of the imperial capital. From a certain perspective, the 8 of them represented the top fighting strength of the younger generation of slaves. The clash between the slaves and the heavenly king who enslaved them was undoubtedly a great source of inspiration for the enslaved people, allowing them to see hope. Even if they were slaves, as long as they persisted in their bitter cultivation, there would be a day when they would stand out and be respected by tens of thousands of people. Most of the slaves came to cheer for Qin Feng and the others. They hoped to witness a miracle and tell those high and mighty people that no matter how low their status was, there would still be people who would step on the geniuses they looked up to. Similarly, there were many people in the imperial capital. Like the slaves, they hoped that the 8 heavenly kings could crush the minds of the slaves and let them know that the young prodigies of the imperial capital could only be looked up to by the slaves, including the people of St. Ryuin. They could never be on par with them. When Qin Feng and the rest arrived outside the large square, they could not help but feel speechless as they looked at the human dragon that had completely blocked the entrance of the square. In the end, they were led into the square through a tightly guarded passageway under the guidance of someone. After passing through a long and pitch-black passageway, they walked out of a cave at the end of their line of sight. The moment they exited the cave, all sorts of incomparably loud noises abruptly rang in their ears, causing Qin Feng and the others, who were still in an extremely quiet environment, to feel dizzy. After a long while, they gradually regained their senses. Raising their heads to look at the densely packed crowd around the plaza, they could not help but smile bitterly at each other. They arrived at their designated seats and quietly waited for the challenge to begin. 8 against 8 will fight together. If anyone is no match for them, immediately withdraw. Mo Xing looked at Qin Feng and the others and sincerely reminded them. His gaze paused on the flower demon for a moment before he finally sighed. Although this little devil was fooling around in the courtyard, this concerned the reputation of the St. Ryuin, so she would not back down no matter what. Her injuries had not completely recovered, but she was not willing to let someone else replace her. Even if she was injured, she was still the strongest strong bones, and her talent and potential were extremely good. She was much stronger than the other students who were at the peak of the strongbone stage. If she went up, there was at least a chance of winning. If it was anyone else, they would definitely lose or even be killed. Therefore, she had no choice but to go up. The reason Mo Xing agreed was that he had obtained the approval of the vice principal after reporting to the higher-ups. He only had one sentence: "My granddaughter, if she wants to fight, she will fight. If she wins, she will be the pride of the Saint Ruin. If she loses, she will also be the hero of the Saint Ruin." The 8 heavenly kings have most likely already taken that half-step. Qin Feng suddenly reminded in a small voice. From the words of the 9th princess and the others, he knew how powerful the 8 heavenly kings were. They had most likely already taken that half-step. Mo Feng was stunned for a moment before shaking his head with a smile. Half a step into the spirit detecting stage? Haha, who isn't? Qin Feng looked at them in astonishment. You forgot about the bone strengthening pill. We have already reached the peak of the strong bone stage, so we can take the bone strengthening pill. Qian Yin smiled and said, right now, we are all half a step into the spirit detecting stage, so we are not weaker than them. It's just a pity that you have already taken it. Taking it again will no longer have any effect. This caused Qin Feng to be stunned for a moment before he understood. He really had forgotten about the bone-strengthening pill. Since it was like this, their side was not completely without a chance of winning. But Song Lin and Zhao Tiannan, you two seniors have to be careful. Don't worry. Even if we die, we will let them know that the bones of the people of the Saint Ruin are tough. The two of them were not afraid at all. The others sighed in their hearts. Tang Ke and the other 2 spirit-detecting stage cultivators had all participated in the spirit-detecting ranking battle and were fighting against the 3 sovereigns of the imperial capital. The only ones they could send out were the 6 from the Sky Hall, because they were the only ones who had forged the strongest strongbones. The others had no chance of winning. In other words, they had already lost 2 rounds. If they wanted to guarantee a draw, at least 4 out of the 6 of them would have to win. If they wanted to win, only one of them would have to lose. 6 against 4, or even 5. Even the higher-ups of the Saint Ruin weren't confident in their chances of winning, so they didn't have much hope. Boom! Suddenly, a thunderous cry erupted from the huge plaza. The clamor was as loud as thunder, and it soared into the sky. Qin Feng and the others raised their heads to look, and their eyes suddenly focused. In the center of the plaza, 8 stages suddenly had huge beams of light descending from the sky, and a powerful spiritual energy fluctuation spread out. Ah! In the plaza, cries rang out continuously, especially from the young girls, whose beautiful eyes blossomed with extraordinary splendor. Under everyone's gazes, 8 beams of light landed on the respective stages. As the light gradually dissipated, 8 figures appeared before everyone's eyes. 8 young sovereigns, 6 males, and 2 females. Every one of them emitted an extremely powerful aura. Qin Feng looked over and found that Lucio Deceives the Frost was among them. This made him stunned. Is this woman also so powerful? Suddenly, his gaze shifted and fell on another stage, where a young man in a golden robe stood. Seeing Qin Feng's gaze, Jin Yan's handsome face couldn't help but reveal a cold smile. His lips moved slightly. Although he didn't say anything, Qin Feng could still distinguish what he was saying. Today I will kill you. A faint coldness flashed across his pitch-black eyes, but Qin Feng's face curved into a faint smile. He nodded at Jin Yan and moved his lips at the same time. Perhaps the one who will die will be you. With the arrival of the 8 heavenly kings, the atmosphere of the entire plaza was instantly pushed to the peak. Countless people screamed and shouted, and their faces flushed red. These were the 8 heavenly kings, who were ranked as heavenly kings among the younger generation. They rarely showed their faces, especially some of them, who were rarely seen. But now, all of them had appeared at once. Moreover, on this day, these heavenly kings would welcome their challengers. Compared to them, the slaves seemed to be somewhat silent, because these 8 young people were really too powerful, and each of them was emitting a terrifying aura. They are indeed the 8 heavenly kings. This was the consensus in everyone's heart at this moment. At this moment, Qin Feng, Qian Yin, Flower Demon, and the others' gazes were slightly focused, and a somewhat dignified look appeared in their eyes. They could feel the strength of these 8 people. Chapter 225. New Enmity, Old Hatred. Very quickly, the judge announced the rules. The 8 strongest fighters will fight against the 8 heavenly kings. Although it's a one-on-one battle, once there's a winner, you can't fight again. However, if there's no winner, you can fight 2 against 1, 2 against 2, or more. As soon as the rules were announced, the whole arena was in an uproar. This kind of battle was very strange. It was either a chaotic battle or a one-on-one battle. Nobody had ever heard of a chaotic battle or a one-on-one battle. However, this made the crowd's blood boil. The 16 strongest fighters would fight in a chaotic battle or a one-on-one battle. This was undoubtedly more exciting. When the Saint Ryuin heard this rule, they were laughing in their hearts. This was exactly what they wanted. This kind of rule, and Mo Feng couldn't help but laugh. They're probably afraid that they won't be able to defeat all of us in a one-on-one battle. Song Lin and Zhao Tiannan's opponents won't be able to defeat them quickly. They'll probably team up with others and fight in a one-on-one battle. That way, they'll benefit from it, Qin Yin said with a smile. However, if Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi team up, they'll be invincible. We were worried that you wouldn't be able to use your trump cards. Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi glanced at each other and smiled. The imperial capital had personally forced the 8 heavenly kings into a dead end. Without a doubt, once Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi team up and use the yin-yang fusion formation, even if 4 or 5 of the 8 heavenly kings team up, they wouldn't be able to defeat them. This kind of rule was extremely beneficial to them. It was enough to guarantee them a complete victory. Whoever defeats his opponent will be able to replace him as the heavenly king. This is the king-conferring battle. Whether or not you can become the king-conferring battle will depend on your own strength. I now announce the start of the final battle of the king-conferring battle. In a split second, the clamor and roar of the crowd resounded through the clouds, shaking the 9 heavens. Everyone stared at the 16 figures on the stage. The top 8 slaves and the young geniuses of the imperial capital. Who would be stronger and who would be weaker? This battle would reveal the result. I heard that Lung Wu Wei is the strongest among the 8 heavenly kings. Leave this opponent to me. Mo Feng smiled and directly jumped onto Lung Wu's stage. Challenger, Saint Ryuin Sky Hall's disciple, Mo Feng. Arena defender, one of the heavenly kings, Lung Wu. Then I'll pick Shui Hu of the 8 heavenly kings. Qin Yin landed on Shui Hu's stage with a loud bang and cupped his fists. Heavenly Palace's disciple, Qin Yin. One of the heavenly kings, Shui Hu. The young man said indifferently. The others chose their own challengers. Disciple of the Sky Palace, Gong Xiaoxi. One of the heavenly kings, Lucio deceives the frost. Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi were right next to each other. They were even closer to Song Lin and Zhao Tiannan's stage. With the crisp sound of a bell, the battle began in an instant. At the same time, terrifying fluctuations of spiritual power erupted from the 8 arenas. Whoosh! Suddenly, Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi attacked Zhao Tiannan's opponent at the same time. Yin-yang fusion formation. Their spiritual power quickly surged out and condensed into a spiritual array. Without hesitation, they attacked Zhao Tiannan's opponent fiercely. Earth-rank spiritual master. That person's pupils shrank fiercely and he retreated reflexively. However, he realized it too late. The two's attacks were as fast as lightning and had already locked onto him. How could they let him escape? As a result, the moment the finals began, a heavenly king was sent flying before he could even display his powerful skills. His body was covered in blood, and he fainted on the spot. Even a heavenly king would not be able to withstand the power of a spirit-detecting stage cultivator with the same potential. This scene shocked everyone. Even if it was 2 against 1, as a heavenly king, it was impossible for him to be heavily injured in one move. What a strange spiritual array. It can let them release the power of an earth-rank spiritual master. The other 6 heavenly kings immediately understood. They all shook off their opponents and rushed towards Song Lin's stage. Because Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi's next target was Song Lin's opponent. Regarding this, Mo Feng and the others only symbolically blocked them a few times before letting them pass. Then, they followed behind them and prepared to pick up the scraps. With them waiting for an opportunity, it was impossible for the 6 heavenly kings to cause any harm to Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi. Boom! Qin Feng and Mo Feng quickly attacked and heavily injured the heavenly king. At the same time, the other 6 heavenly kings also surrounded and attacked. Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi calmly dealt with it. They mobilized their spiritual power to stop the 6 people's attacks. Boom! Suddenly, a power that was not inferior to the yin-yang fusion formation erupted. 2 heavenly kings rushed over side by side. That power had actually reached the spirit detecting stage for a short period of time. Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi's pupils shrank as they hurriedly mobilized the yin-yang fusion formation's power to resist. Rumble! With a loud explosion in the air, the 4 of them were all sent flying. They also have the power to unite. Qin Feng's heart trembled. He immediately understood why the imperial capital had such a rule. It was because they also had a power similar to the yin-yang fusion formation. Not only him, but everyone else also felt a chill. If he and Gong Xiaoxi hadn't mastered the yin-yang fusion formation, the 8 of them would have been wiped out in this battle. Mo Feng and the others also came back to their senses and quickly rushed over. Hee, I didn't expect you to have such a method. Lung Wu looked at Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi, shook his head, and sighed. Spiritual power masters' attacks are really strange and unpredictable. You're not weak either. You can actually combine your spiritual power to unleash such an attack. Mo Feng retorted. Lung Wu smiled faintly. After a moment of silence, he said, "This is your biggest trump card, and our trump cards are not weaker than yours. In my opinion, we should all give up on this method and have a real battle between the peak. After all, this power doesn't belong to us." No one was surprised by Lung Wu's suggestion, nor did they oppose it. They all agreed with it. These young geniuses all had their own pride and wanted to prove themselves in a fair battle. However, there were rules from above, so they could only focus on the overall situation. However, now that their biggest trump card was restrained, they could only use their favorite one-on-one battle. One of the 8 heavenly kings was gone, and the other was seriously injured. Presumably, it wouldn't be too difficult for Song Lin and Zhao Tiannan to deal with them. The current situation wasn't too bad for them. Everyone returned to their respective arenas. The battle immediately broke out, and a terrifying spiritual power fluctuation exploded. Every time, there was a huge explosion of energy and the sound of something breaking through the air. In another arena, Jin Yin looked at Qin Feng with a playful gaze. He was not in a hurry to make a move. You didn't expect that you would dare to challenge my heavenly king position, but this time, you don't have any protection. He looked at Qin Feng with a playful expression. In his eyes, there was a trace of coldness. Chapter 226. Fighting Jin Yin. I'm thinking about how to make your death more comfortable, Jin Yin said with a smile. There was no warmth in his voice. Qin Feng glared at him impatiently. Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Jin Yin's face twitched, and his smile slowly disappeared. A powerful wave of spiritual energy spread out from his body, shaking the void. He flipped his palm, and with a flash of light, a folding fan appeared in his hand. The folding fan was completely golden, and the fan seemed to be made of pure gold. Even the surface of the fan was covered with a golden oilcloth. The golden folding fan rippled with golden light, and there was a strong fluctuation of spiritual energy on it. Obviously, this was not an ordinary folding fan. It was a magic treasure of quite a high level. I didn't want to use it, but you're lucky that I think highly of you. Jin Yin smiled coldly. He waved the fan in his hand, and a golden light shot out. Qin Feng looked at the golden light that pierced through the void indifferently. He didn't dodge. Instead, he took out his stone axe and chopped at it. After dispersing the golden light, Qin Feng raised his head and looked over. His eyes suddenly focused. At this moment, Jin Yan's figure had already disappeared. The spiritual energy in Qin Feng's body surged, and he took half a step to the side. The moment he moved, the tip of the golden fan pierced towards him from behind. His attack missed, and the fan swung violently, heavily smashing into the stone axe. Suddenly, an ear-piercing sound was heard, and sparks flew in all directions. Qin Feng was pushed back a distance. Before he could even catch his breath, the tip of the fan attacked again, and once again struck the stone axe heavily. Ding-dang! Sparks flew, and an invisible force burst out from the point of contact. Even the sound of air being squeezed could be heard. Qin Feng once again took a few steps back. His expression was grave as he stared at the indifferent Jin Yan. The latter's speed and strength had far exceeded his expectations. In particular, the power contained within the folding fan caused even him to feel a little apprehensive. After 2 collisions, his arm was slightly numb, as expected of one of the 8 heavenly kings. Good perception. Jin Yan chuckled and rushed over again. Thus, the sound of metal colliding rang out continuously. Sparks flew everywhere, and spiritual energy erupted. The collision between the 2 of them caused even more violent energy to wreak havoc. Although Qin Feng hated this person, he had to admit that he was strong. Jin Yan's figure was extremely graceful and agile. His footsteps were strange, and his moves were ruthless and unfathomable. Qin Feng, on the other hand, was unrestrained. He didn't have any moves to speak of. He was purely fighting with a brute force. Every time the stone axe was swung, punched, or kicked, it would cause a loud noise. The air was constantly being crushed by his attacks. In the battle between the 2, one was as agile as a monkey, while the other was like a human-shaped bear. His strength was astonishing, and his aura was oppressive. Every time he swung it, the sound of wind whistling would be heard. In the battle between the 2, it seemed that Qin Feng's aura was stronger, while Jin Yan seemed to be constantly dodging. He could only occasionally counterattack. However, only those with keen eyesight could see the difference between the 2. The 2 seemed to be evenly matched, but in fact, Qin Feng was at a disadvantage. This was because his way of fighting consumed a lot of energy. Moreover, Jin Yan's seemingly weak body would erupt with ear-piercing sounds every time he collided with the stone axe. Only Qin Feng could feel the strength of his power. What a strange axe! While Qin Feng was shocked, Jin Yan's eyes flashed. The material of his golden fan was extremely precious. Ordinary weapons couldn't block it at all. However, this humble stone axe was not damaged at all after taking so many hits. There wasn't even a mark on it. Clang! The tip of the fan hit the stone axe heavily once again. Sparks and airwaves erupted. Qin Feng hurriedly retreated. On the other hand, Jin Yan's figure was steady. Obviously, Jin Yan had the absolute upper hand. Shaking his numb arm, Qin Feng's face was extremely serious. This Jin Yan's strength was indeed tyrannical. If he hadn't used the demon eye that night and improved his strength, he might have really died here today. Moreover, the imperial family had the gold god tactic. He couldn't use the water god tactic and the fire god tactic to avoid being discovered. This tactic was very mysterious. If they knew that he had 2, they would definitely use all means to snatch it. He put away the stone axe. He didn't know how to use this weapon. In a battle of this level, it was a bit useless. It would also affect his speed. Jin Yan's speed was very fast. His moves were strange and unpredictable. He had to increase his speed. Since you're so fast, let's compete. Let's see who's faster. Qin Feng sneered in his heart. Seeing this, Jin Yan's eyes narrowed. He could feel that Qin Feng seemed to be in danger after the weapon left his hand. Dong! Qin Feng lightly stomped his foot on the ground. His body suddenly turned into a black arrow and shot toward Jin Yan. A huge explosion occurred in the air. Good speed. But why did it suddenly increase by so much? Jin Yan said in his heart. He quickly retreated. Although Qin Feng's speed had increased, it didn't cause much trouble for him, who had always been good at speed. Qin Feng's speed increased again. In a flash, he appeared in front of Jin Yan. Jin Yan's face suddenly changed. He fiercely swung the folding fan in his hand. Swoosh! The folding fan hit the black shadow. But before Jin Yan could celebrate, his pupil shrank. The folding fan hit the black shadow, but it didn't feel like it was real. The folding fan passed through the black shadow. After image, Jin Yan exclaimed in his heart. How did his opponent's speed increase by so much? He suddenly turned around and saw an indifferent face. At the same time, a finger filled with violent power pointed at him. Sky-devouring finger. Seeing this, Jin Yan didn't panic. He calmly raised the folding fan and pointed it at the fist. A golden light swept out. Golden sky art. Bang! A muffled sound was emitted. The two of them simultaneously retreated a few steps. Qin Feng retreated a distance before stabilizing his body, after which he attacked once again without stopping. This time around, the situation was reversed. Regardless of how fast Jin Yan's speed was or how strange his moves were, under the even faster Qin Feng's attacks, they were all dwarfed by each other. Boom! On the other side, the other battles were also in full swing. They were very intense and attracted many people's attention. What shocked countless people was that the heavenly kings, who were originally in a crushing situation, had all fallen into a bitter battle. Countless people in the imperial city couldn't accept this scene. The contrast was too great. So far, no one had won. This was completely different from what they had imagined. They were the 8 heavenly kings. How could they fight with those lowly slaves for so long? Many people's thoughts and feelings of superiority were crushed. They were a little depressed. Why were the 8 heavenly kings, who were respected by everyone, fighting with slaves? But no matter how much they didn't believe it, the cruel reality was right in front of them. After such a long battle, no heavenly king had won. They didn't even show any advantage. Bang! After a heavy collision, Qin Feng and Jin Yan both retreated a distance, leaving 2 long drag marks on the ground. At this moment, both of them looked quite miserable. Their clothes were torn and they were panting. Qin Feng's fist was dripping with blood, and there was a bloody mark on his shoulder and calf. Obviously, he was hit by the tip of Jin Yan's fan in the battle just now. Similarly, Jin Yan's situation wasn't much better. He was even more miserable than Qin Feng. There were many scratches on his clothes, and the hand holding the folding fan was trembling. There were 4 or 5 fist marks and footprints on his body. On the other hand, there were 3 bloody marks. His hair was also messy. He, who was usually elegant, was quite miserable at this moment. Both of them had used many earth art battle skills, but they were all neutralized by the other. Good. Jin Yan stared at Qin Feng, his eyes cold. At the same time, his heart trembled. Qin Feng's strength was beyond his imagination. He was even more powerful than Wu Yu that day. Looks like I can't hold back anymore, he whispered in his heart, and he stopped looking down on Qin Feng. Jin Yan's hands quickly formed a seal, and the golden folding fan floated in front of him, trembling violently. Every time the fan moved, it would condense an illusory fan. In a short time, dozens of illusory fans had been condensed. Looking at this scene, Qin Feng's heart was heavy. His eyes flickered. Jin Yan was obviously using his killer move. His flickering eyes narrowed slightly. Soon after, he slowly exhaled as a battle technique flashed across his mind. Buzz. The illusory fans were condensed into hundreds of illusory fans in a dozen breaths' time. Under Jin Yan's control, the hundreds of fans constantly vibrated and buzzed. At this moment, Jin Yan's face was slightly pale. Obviously, this attack consumed a lot of his energy. Go! He gently waved his hand. The fan shadows suddenly shot towards Qin Feng like a storm, and each of them contained an extremely powerful force. Chapter 227. The Battle of the Century. That Qin Feng is going to lose. Many people were excited, thinking that the outcome of this battle would be decided soon. Under the gaze of countless people, Qin Feng suddenly opened his eyes, a strange luster flickering in his black and white eyes. He put his palms together and slowly formed an ancient seal. Screech! There seemed to be a faint cry of a divine bird. Qin Feng's body shook, and a pair of huge transparent light wings unfolded from his back. The light wings closed, just enough to envelop him. Buzz! When the wings of light closed, the golden folding fan that blotted out the sky and covered the earth rushed down. Even the air was torn apart wherever it passed. If an ordinary peak bone, strengthening stage cultivator were to face such an attack, he would have been instantly pierced by these shadows and turned into a sieve. Chi! Chi! The folding fan phantoms collided with the light wings, constantly bursting out golden light spots, and the light wings trembled slightly. However, none of the folding fan phantoms could break through the light wings blockade. From afar, Jin Yan's countenance turned somewhat gloomy when he saw this scene. This move of his had defeated countless opponents in the past, and was always successful. But now, it was completely useless against Qin Feng's tortoiseshell defense. When the golden folding fan phantoms were exhausted, the light wings could not be maintained, and turned into light spots, dissipating. Looking at this scene, countless people were shocked, and their mouths were wide open. Even at this stage, he still could not defeat the slave Qin Feng. Qin Feng's excessive strength gave some people a bad premonition. This kid seems a little strange. Someone in the judge's booth said with an ugly face, "Some of this guy's moves are very strange. It seems that our information about him is not accurate." Could it be? That person suddenly opened his eyes wide, and there was a thick look of disbelief in his eyes. Yes, it's some kind of summoning spell. He should be summoning the phoenix wings. A trace of surprise flowed in the myriad law venerable's eyes, and he said faintly, "This is a spell derived from battle skills, but this kind of spell is very unpopular and difficult to cultivate. I didn't expect him to cultivate this kind of spell and have some small achievements. But it's still unpopular, and it's a broken spell that can't be mastered. Compared to powerful battle skills, there's still some gap," someone retorted with disdain. "Maybe." The myriad law venerable glanced at that person and did not say anything, but his eyes were fixed on Qin Feng. Venerable wants to take him as a disciple. Someone's heart skipped a beat. Summoning spells are indeed difficult to achieve. They require the caster to be stronger than the summoned creature. But even if the summoning creature, there won't be any increase. But this kind of spell is mysterious. After all, there may be unexpected gains. The myriad law venerable said faintly. Although he did not answer directly, the myriad law venerable said faintly. A few people were astonished. Just how high was the 10,000 law senior standards? They knew that even some of the 8 great heavenly kings wanted to take him as their master, but they were all rejected. But now he actually took a fancy to a slave, intending to take him as his last disciple. How could this not be surprising? On the stage, Qin Feng stared coldly at the pale Jin Yan. He was overjoyed. He did not expect the old man to teach him this kind of battle skill to be so powerful. When he obtained it, he was afraid of situations similar to the divine emperor's aura, so he did not cultivate it. Later on, when the heaven's path was about to open, he wanted to increase his strength, so he carefully cultivated it. What level is this? Heaven art level? It shouldn't be. Qin Feng thought. Heaven art level battle skills could only be cultivated after stepping into the spirit detecting realm. But he had not mastered this kind of battle skill yet, and he was able to block Jin Yan's long-prepared ultimate move. Obviously, his level was not low. Now it's my turn to attack. Qin Feng smiled faintly. His hands quickly formed a seal, and the space behind him rippled violently. Roar! With a deep roar, a huge transparent dragon claw stretched out from the distorted space, accompanied by some kind of ancient roar, as if it came from the Desolation era, and a terrifying power was released. Try to take one of my attacks. After successfully performing a move, Qin Feng smiled with relief. His understanding of the divine dragon art had deepened a lot. Immediately, he pointed his finger at Jin Yan. Rumble. Suddenly, the huge dragon claw rushed over like a small, transparent mountain, and rushed toward Jin Yin with an aura that could cause the air to explode. How is this possible? Jin Yin stared at the dragon claw, his eyes filled with disbelief and a trace of fear. It's fake. Don't try to confuse me. He roared, and golden light surged around his body. Golden light erupted from his palms. He pushed his hands forward, and in an instant, the golden light surpassed the scorching sun in the sky. Even under the intense heat, it also carried a heavy defensive power. Bang! The shroud heavily hit Jin Yan's palms, pushing him to the edge of the stage. The fierce power was exhausted and slowly dissipated. Jin Yan still maintained his pushing posture, and he was panting heavily. His arms were trembling, and he was extremely shocked. He was at a disadvantage in the battle, and he could not accept such an outcome. It's a pity that your understanding is not deep enough, and you can't use all of it. Qin Feng shook his head regretfully. He was very dissatisfied and deliberately mocked his opponent. Jin Yin was so angry that he almost vomited blood when he saw Su Mo's expression. Su Mo had forced him to this point, and he was still not satisfied. However, I won't give you any more chances. While he was cursing in his heart, Qin Feng's cold voice suddenly sounded. Jin Yan's heart skipped a beat, and his eyes narrowed slightly. His many years of combat experience allowed him to detect a hint of danger. Qin Feng lightly stomped his feet, and his body rose from the ground, and he swooped down toward Jin Yan. As he rose into the air, a pair of light wings appeared on his back. Qin Feng swooped down and punched out. An invisible force attacked, and it directly formed a giant air fist, bombarding toward Jin Yan. Jin Yan roared and attacked with all his strength. Golden light burst out, and he collided head-on with Qin Feng. In the arena, the energy boiled and the air exploded. The two of them fought fiercely, and each time they attacked, the air would explode. Every time Qin Feng attacked, there was a low dragon roar. This was the strength of the divine dragon skill. It did not need to be performed one by one. When one's understanding reached a certain level, it was as if a divine dragon was on his body, and each attack carried the power of the divine dragon. Pucci! Suddenly, Jin Yi retreated, and then he was sent flying by Qin Feng's attack. He was severely injured. In the stands, countless people were dumbfounded by this scene, and they were frightened. Jin Yin, the young master of the Jin clan, one of the 8 heavenly kings, was defeated. Boom! Qin Feng punched again, and the giant fist turned into a dragon shadow, roaring and shaking the void. Bang! Jin Yin was sent flying again, and he was already at a disadvantage. However, just as Qin Feng was about to finish the fight, there was a sudden exclamation. He turned around and found that Flower Demon was in danger. In the arena where she was, a terrifying energy burst out. Zhou Yin's body floated in the air, releasing a terrifying power. Below him, Flower Demon kept retreating. Go to hell, Zhou Yin shouted, and his big hand pressed toward Flower Demon. He saw that Jin Yin was in danger, so he wanted to kill Flower Demon and win the first round to boost the morale of his team. Boom! The energy condensed into a giant hand, and it slapped toward Flower Demon with incomparable power. Facing his tyrannical attack, Flower Demon could not help but pale. Her strength was damaged, and she could not use her full strength. Whoosh! However, at this moment, a figure suddenly blocked in front of her. Qin Feng slapped out, and the dragon claw appeared again, clashing with the energy hand. At the same time, he raised his hand and attacked in the opposite direction. A giant dragon roared and attacked Jin Yin, who was chasing over. A great battle between 2 heavenly kings. Chapter 228. 1 against 2 boom. A violent energy explosion resounded through the sky. Following the energy impact, Jin Yin was sent flying and landed at the edge of Zhou Yin's stage. Although Zhou Yin was expressionless and did not receive any shock, there was some astonishment deep within his eyes. Clearly, Qin Feng's actions had exceeded his expectations. Both sides' trump cards were restrained, so they chose to fight one-on-one. However, they were not opposed to fighting in numbers. It was just that one person was injured and one person was forced to retreat. They had already lost a great advantage. Neither side had such an advantage. Victory or defeat could only depend on individual strength. But he had not expected that Qin Feng would dare to choose this mode of battle. Originally, he had defeated Flower Demon, and Qin Feng had defeated Jin Yan. Both sides had won a round. Now that Qin Feng was like this, wouldn't he have lost 2 rounds? Reckless fool. He sneered and stared coldly at Qin Feng. Since Qin Feng had come to his arena, he would not let him go no matter what. Ever since he had left God's treasure pavilion, he had been holding a grudge against Qin Feng. Now that Qin Feng had taken the initiative to provoke him, it was what he wanted. With regards to Qin Feng's actions, some of the Saint Ruin's higher-ups felt helpless. His actions had indeed saved Flower Demon, but he had also given up 2 rounds. The advantage he had built up previously was also gone. Tang Ran, Gong Xiaoxi, Mo Feng, and the others, who had been fighting bitterly, had complicated expressions on their faces. They had been with Flower Demon for a longer time, and they believed that their relationship with her was deeper than Qin Feng's. Just now, they also had the same thought, but they didn't put into action. However, Qin Feng didn't even think before rushing over. Moreover, it was in a situation where he had established a huge advantage. This caused them to feel somewhat guilty, but the overall situation was more important. Hence, losing 2 rounds wasn't good for their situation. At Saint Ruin, the 2 of them were always at loggerheads. It was either you beat me up or I slandered you. They had never been on good terms, but at this moment, he was the first one to save Flower Demon from her crisis. It could be said that Qin Feng had a poor view of the overall situation, but no one dared to say that they valued relationships more than him. Flower Demon was also stunned by Qin Feng's appearance. She immediately scolded, "Why are you here? I don't want you to save me." Looking at the pale Flower Demon, Qin Feng smiled and said, "But I can't just watch you die. Since I'm already here, just let me win this time. Don't go against me." Looking at Qin Feng's smile, that usually made her gnash her teeth in anger, Flower Demon's heart suddenly stirred. She took a deep breath and suppressed this inexplicable feeling. "All right, I'll go with you. In your current situation, you'll only be a burden to me." Seeing that Flower Demon wanted to refute, Qin Feng shook his head and said seriously, "If one of them holds me back while the other attacks you, you definitely won't be able to stop them. You'll be killed by them. That way, it'll be easier to affect me. It's better for you to leave and let them lose this trump card. It'll also allow me to focus on the enemy. If I can't fight 1 against 2, there won't be much of an effect even if you join us. If you leave and we really can't win, it's better for me to die than both of us. Besides, I still have my spiritual power. I won't be defeated so easily. Sister Jeannie, leave. Don't be a burden to me and don't distract me. Take it as me begging you." Qin Feng's voice was very soft, but when Flower Demon heard it, her delicate body suddenly trembled. After a long silence, she nodded and said, "If you die, I'll definitely bring your corpse back to Saint Ruin and whip it every day." "Ha ha ha! Big Demon Flower, you're indeed full of malice towards me. However, I'm afraid you won't have the chance." Qin Feng looked up to the sky and laughed. His thunderous voice resounded throughout the entire arena. No one knew what Qin Feng and Flower Demon said, but Flower Demon's action of leaving the arena shocked everyone. At this moment, everyone in the entire plaza was stunned. They stared blankly at the figure in the arena. 1 against 2. After a long while, the sound of people sucking in cold air could be heard. Everyone stared at this scene with their mouths agape. They felt their mouths go dry. This Qin Feng was too crazy. He actually fought 1 against 2 heavenly kings. He didn't even have a chance of winning when he teamed up with the heavily injured Flower Demon. Now that he was alone, wasn't he courting death? He could suppress a heavenly king, which was indeed very scary. However, no one believed that he could deal with 2 at the same time. Because Jin Yin was only suppressed by him and wasn't seriously injured like Flower Demon, he didn't lose much of his battle strength. Seeing this, Zhou Yin couldn't help but be stunned. Then, he sneered, "You want to challenge both of us at once?" "Why not?" Qin Feng shrugged. His whole body was boiling with fighting spirit. "You're really arrogant. Since you want to play, I'll play with you." Zhou Yin's eyes were cold. He waved his arm, and an emerald green futon appeared in a flash. It quickly expanded to about 1 or 2 meters in diameter, bigger than a millstone. The futon floated in the air. Zhou Yin's body moved and landed on it. Although he was confident, he wasn't conceited. Since Qin Feng could suppress Jin Yin, it was enough to show how difficult it was to deal with him. Therefore, he took out his magic treasure and didn't hold back. He was going to use his strongest means to defeat him. Qin Feng glanced at him and then looked at the gloomy Jin Yin. He frowned slightly. Facing two at the same time, even he felt a little pressured. Jin Yin's face was gloomy as he walked forward. "Brother Jin, leave this person to me," Zhou Yin said with a smile. "This kind of arrogant person must pay a painful price for his actions." Jin Yin frowned. After a moment of silence, he stepped back and looked coldly at Qin Feng. Qin Feng slightly raised his eyebrows at this situation. It seemed that Zhou Yin was very conceited. However, this was even better. Zhou Yin stood on the futon and swooped down. Powerful spiritual energy erupted from his body as he collided with Qin Feng. However, he retreated after one strike. He drew a concave arc on the ground and flew back into the air. Bang! 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 The arena stage was filled with explosions. The two of them exchanged more than 10 moves. Every time Zhou Yin attacked, he retreated. He didn't want to be entangled with Qin Feng. Qin Feng frowned in the face of this somewhat shameless way of fighting. Strong bone stage cultivators did have the ability to fly for a short period of time, but the consumption was not small. Therefore, generally no one would fight in the air. Zhou Yin obviously didn't have the advantage with this kind of treasure. Damn big demon flower. She didn't teach him how to use the clear sky gourd before leaving. Qin Feng was helpless. Flower Demon also slapped her thigh. She had been dealing with Zhou Yin for so long. How could she forget to provide Qin Feng with a flying tool? Now that she had left, she couldn't provide any help. Boom! After another strike, Qin Feng retreated a distance, while Zhou Yin continued to fly back into the air. Those with flying treasures would inevitably have a certain advantage. Qin Feng frowned. Zhou Yin could fly. How could he fight? He could use the light wings, but for now, it wasn't stable for long. Moreover, he couldn't control it freely. Even if he could fight in the air, it would consume a lot of his energy. This way, he wouldn't have an advantage. If I can get to the futon, Qin Feng's eyes flickered for a moment, and a plan flashed through his mind. In the following battle, he kept retreating, seeming to be very embarrassed. Seeing that Qin Feng was at a disadvantage, the surrounding stand suddenly burst into cheers. Jin Yin was suppressed by him, which had shaken their belief that the 8 super kings were invincible. But now, Zhou Yin was suppressing Qin Feng, which was enough to show that the 8 super kings were invincible. Goldenrock's super king must have been careless and fell into his trap, someone outside the arena said coldly. Yes, Goldenrock's super king and Zhou Yin's strength are almost the same. If he hadn't fallen into this person's trap, how could he have fallen into a disadvantage? Some people around echoed. These were all Goldenrock's admirers. Their faces were ugly before, but now they were in high spirits because they thought that Goldenrock was not really defeated by Qin Feng, but was just careless. In the arena, Qin Feng was constantly pushed back by Zhou Yin's attacks, and he was about to retreat to the edge of the arena. Zhou Yin was overjoyed when he saw this scene. Qin Feng's ground combat strength was indeed not weak, but he didn't even have the power to fight back when he encountered him, who had a flying magic weapon. Go to hell! Zhou Yin shouted loudly and rushed down. The spiritual power around him burst out, turning into a torrent and roaring out. Qin Feng's face was calm. When he was 3 meters away from him, he suddenly raised his left palm, and a bolt of lightning suddenly burst out, bombarding the futon. Crack! Suddenly, blue light bloomed, and arcs of lightning wantonly spread out. At this moment, Zhou Yin's body suddenly stopped, and then his speed slowed down. This is the time. Qin Feng's eyes were bright. He stomped his feet heavily and directly stomped the ground. His body soared into the sky, landed on the futon and launched a storm-like attack. His attacks were very simple. They were punches, elbows, knees, and legs. Every bombardment would forcibly suppress the air, accompanied by a dull dragon's roar, causing the surrounding to constantly emit sonic booms. Zhou Yin's body slowed down for a second, but in a battle between experts, even half a second could determine the outcome. And in this second, Qin Feng not only rushed onto the futon, but also blasted out 8 punches. Zhou Yin directly fell from the impact, and the futon that lost its control also lost its ability to float and also fell. This was a lightning attack that Qin Feng learned in St. Ryuan. Its power wasn't great, but when used, it could have an unexpected effect, such as now. He followed up, and his fist blasted out. Whoosh! But at this moment, a strong spiritual power shot out. Qin Feng turned around and blasted it with a punch. Zhou Yin's sudden defeat made Jin Yin unable to hold back. He violently attacked, and his spiritual power turned into a big hand, slapping it. Qin Feng clenched his fist and then blasted out. A dragon's claw roared out, and a dragon's roar shook the sky, tearing the big hand apart. At the same time, a pair of light wings flashed behind his back, enveloping him and blocking Zhou Yin's angry attack. Chapter 229. Make breakthroughs. Separately, Zhou Yin recovered, and his numbed body regained its strength. He roared and charged toward Qin Feng again, his face ferocious. Even though he possessed a flying magic treasure, he was still defeated by Qin Feng. To him, this was an unbearable humiliation. Only by tearing Qin Feng to pieces would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart. At this moment, Jin Yin also went all out, no longer holding back. Moreover, after the rest just now, he had already recovered, and his battle strength was astonishing. Qin Feng was fearless. As he raised his left hand, the roar of a dragon resounded. As he waved his right hand, the roar of a tiger shook the heavens. Being besieged by 2 peerless young masters, Yi Futian's fighting spirit was astonishing. Once again, he performed the technique that the old man taught him. Above his right hand, the tiger's roar was unceasing. Together with the divine dragon technique in his left hand, the dragon followed the clouds, and the tiger followed the wind. The combination of the two was truly astonishing. His hands continuously swung out the force of dragon and tiger, clashing with the two of them. On the stage, spiritual energy wreaked havoc, the wind blew, and the sound of energy explosions rang out continuously. As time passed, the battle became even more intense and incandescent. Spiritual energy gushed out from the 3 of them, as if it was free. The 3 of them fought fiercely on the stage, moving extremely quickly. Every time they collided, a huge sound would erupt, causing countless people to feel a chill in their hearts. To fight against 2 heavenly kings by himself, this was really happening. Countless people in the imperial capital were dumbfounded, unable to accept all of this. The main reason was that the 2 heavenly kings had joined forces. Not to mention suppressing Qin Feng, they couldn't even gain the upper hand. As one of the 8 heavenly kings, they were revered and worshipped by countless young people. Every single one of them had the potential to be invincible. They were geniuses among geniuses. They had always swept through everything in their path, and it was difficult for them to meet a worthy opponent. But now, the 2 of them had joined forces and actually fought to a draw with a slave. How could the young people who took the 8 heavenly kings as their goal and role models accept this? The 8 heavenly kings' belief of being invincible among the younger generation was shaken at this moment. Each and every one of them looked as if their mother had died. The slaves raised by St. Ryuan are truly terrifying. Only now did they have to admit that the young people of St. Ryuan were also very frightening. They were not inferior to the 8 heavenly kings. St. Ryuan is mighty. The slaves, on the other hand, were shouting excitedly, venting the resentment that had been pinned up in their hearts for a long time. Didn't the people of the imperial capital always look down on slaves like them? Now, take a good look. The invincible 8 heavenly kings in your hearts can't even deal with a slave. The so-called invincibility of the 8 heavenly kings was truly a joke. This naked slap was really satisfying. There were people spying on them from all around the square. Their hearts were heavy, and they didn't know how to describe it. The ninth princess stared blankly at the image in the crystal ball. Her mouth was so wide open that an egg could be stuffed in. Mother asterisk her, this bastard actually concealed himself so deeply. Even someone as dignified as her could not help but curse at this moment. Qin Feng was simply pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger, causing her to worry for nothing. She even carefully analyzed the gap between him and the 8 heavenly kings. She even vowed to him that he was definitely not a match for any of the 8 heavenly kings. Now that she thought about it, the ninth princess's cheeks were a little hot. While the ninth princess was muttering, she did not notice that Xian Yuan Owl had unknowingly appeared behind her. His pair of eyes were incomparably deep and flickered with an unknown luster. In another luxurious room, the 7th prince, Xian Yuan Mao, calmly looked at the image in front of him. Then, the corners of his mouth lifted into a playful arc. How interesting, but this is also good. Otherwise, I won't be interested at all. He laughed lowly, and an unusually strong spiritual energy overflowed, causing the void to tremble. Boom! The 3 people fought fiercely. Qin Feng's right hand roared like a fierce tiger, and his left hand roared like a dragon. The light wings on his back flickered as he fought against the 2 heavenly kings. Is actually strong to this extent. The flower demon could not help but murmur in disbelief. Mo Xing and the other higher-ups of the St. Ryuan were not as relaxed as them. The 8 heavenly kings were not easy to deal with. However, no matter what, Qin Feng was able to fight fiercely with them to this extent, which was indeed beyond their expectations. Boom! Once again, the 3 people collided, and each of them retreated a distance. At this moment, Qin Feng's figure was rather miserable. His clothes were torn, his hair was disheveled, and he was panting heavily. The light wings on his back flickered a few times before disappearing. The tiger's roar on his right hand also gradually weakened. He still had not fully grasped the technique that the old man taught him, so he could not use it for a long time. Of course, Jin Yin and Zhou Lian opposite him were not much better. Both of them had wounds on their bodies, and blood was seeping out. Jin Yan's eyes were malicious, and there was a trace of shock and fear hidden in the depths of his eyes. Qin Feng's strength was beyond his imagination. Although he was unwilling to accept it, he knew that neither he nor Zhou Lian would be a match for him. Perhaps the only ones who could truly contend against him were those 2. You are indeed very strong to be able to fight both of us at the same time for a short period of time. However, the ones who will lose in the end will definitely be you. Zhou Yin sneered. You have so much confidence in those 2. Qin Feng mocked. Among the 8 heavenly kings, Lung Wuwei was the strongest, followed by Xue Hu. He knew that they were talking about those 2. Seeing this, Zhou Lian and Jin Yin looked at each other and smiled malevolently. The latter sneered and said, "Do you really think those 2 have a chance of winning?" Looking at the mocking smiles on their faces, Qin Feng's heart suddenly sank. Could it be that Lung Wuwei and Xue Hu's strength? Impossible! One could not fight in the strongbone battlefield after reaching the spirit detecting stage, unless Qin Feng suddenly turned his head and his eyes narrowed slightly. The battlefields of Mo Feng and Qian Yin had actually calmed down. The several stages that were still fiercely fighting a moment ago had quieted down at the same time, and the entire square was silent as well. Numerous gazes blankly watched this scene. Some of the big shots that knew the inside story sneered in their hearts as they calmly watched. On the stage, Lung Wuwei, who was wearing white, had a handsome face and an extraordinary temperament. Even though he had been fighting for a long time, he did not show any signs of being in a sorry state. He faintly smiled and said, "The top students of the St. Ryuan are indeed extraordinary." As he spoke, the spirit energy around him suddenly converged. After a moment of silence, An even more terrifying aura erupted. However, you guys are still a bit lacking. This is the real deal. On the other side, a terrifying aura also erupted from Xuehu's body. The strongbow battlefield is complete, and the spirit is born. This is the spirit connection. They have reached the spirit detecting stage. They have the qualifications to break through. At this moment, Qin Feng's eyes fiercely shrank. He finally understood where Zhou Yin and Jin Yan's confidence came from. The two of them were not in the spirit detecting stage, but had the qualifications to break through. If that was the case, then it was not against the rules. Now that the two of them had reached the spirit connection stage, Mo Feng and Qian Yin had no chance of winning. If they were not in a hurry to win, then the seven of them would without a doubt die. At this moment, even with his calm temperament, his heart tightened. The other side had two spirit detecting stage experts. Even if he teamed up with Gong Xiaoxi, they would not be enough. Lung Wu, Shui. Suddenly, a thunderous roar erupted from the square. It was as if the people of the imperial capital had been injected with chicken blood as they roared in excitement. This scene was too King wonderful. From the beginning of the battle, both sides had been locked in a bitter battle. Their hearts had been in their throats the entire time, and they had even felt disappointed and hesitant. However, at this moment, after the two of them had broken through to the spirit detecting stage, they no longer had to worry. We will definitely win. Many people excitedly shouted. On the other hand, the faces of the slaves were all ugly. It was as if they had fallen from heaven to hell. It was as uncomfortable as it could be. Chapter 230. Crazy Battle. How is it? Are you guys still confident? Jin Yin mocked as he heard the cheers. Qin Feng frowned. After a moment of silence, his eyes suddenly narrowed as he looked at Mo Feng and Qian Yin. The two of them didn't look panicked, but rather stunned and helpless. What's going on? Qin Feng was shocked. Could it be that the two of them also had the qualifications to communicate with spirits? The 8 heavenly kings are indeed extraordinary. Mo Feng shook his head, but there wasn't any disappointment in his eyes. He took a step forward and changed the topic. However, it's hard to say who will win today. As his voice fell, an aura that wasn't any weaker than Lung Wu's erupted from his body. Everyone was stunned as they stared at Mo Feng. This guy can communicate with spirits too? Luckily, if it's just one of them, they won't be able to do much. Someone comforted himself. Looks like we've reached this step. There's no other way. We can only break through. Yin shook his head. He stomped his foot and the stage cracked. His aura also skyrocketed as he broke through the barrier of the bone-strengthening realm and reached the spirit-detecting realm. Another 2 auras of the spirit-detecting realm erupted. Everyone in the plaza fell into a daze. Even the judges were speechless. The entire plaza was silent. Mother Asterisker, you can't play with people like this. Someone outside the arena started to curse. He was shouting at the top of his lungs and looked furious. Fuck, watching this battle. I'll lose at least 20 years of my life. Hurry up and decide the victor. I can accept any ending as long as it doesn't scare my little heart. Many people voiced out their emotions. They really couldn't stand this kind of ups and downs in the competition. It had never happened before. It was simply grinding people to death. They originally thought that the 8 heavenly kings could crush their opponents, but they ended up in a bitter battle. As Jin Yin fell into a disadvantage, many people became nervous. They were worried that they would lose. But luckily, Zhou Yin injured his opponent and was able to defeat Qin Feng 2-1. This allowed them to see hope again. However, it was a King fair duel. That was fine. After all, Zhou Yin had suppressed Qin Feng in the duel. However, the situation was clearly in their favor, yet they suddenly fell into a disadvantageous position. What the hell was this? Was this an acrobatic performance? They could still accept acrobatics. 2 against 1, they could definitely suppress Qin Feng quickly and take the opportunity to help the others. In this way, their side would win. However, what the hell were the two of you doing? The two of you could still maintain a draw against one. Were you joking with them? Was the other party too strong? Or are you all trash? Fine. Even if it was a joke, they would accept it. After all, Lung Wu and Shui, who had both broken through to the spirit detecting realm. At this time, they firmly believed that there was no more suspense in the competition. The little flame of hope that had almost been extinguished was ignited again. However, just as the little flame of hope was burning brighter and brighter, a cold wind blew over. Two of the opponents had also broken through, and they weren't any weaker than Lung Wu and Shui Hu. This was like an acrobatic performance. Could it be any more fake? They suspected that the higher-ups had given them a script to perform according to the script in order to attract attention and maintain the popularity of the show. Would the next side fall into a disadvantage and then reverse the situation again? Then someone would break through again, but then again, the opponent would have a way to deal with it. I know you guys have a hard time competing, but can you also consider us? We're also in pain watching this. Someone shouted from the stands. They really couldn't bear this kind of competition with so many twists and turns. They were very worried that their hearts would suddenly die from being too nervous. As a result, the originally serious competition for the position of Heavenly King had now become comical. The referees were also speechless. They had never encountered a competition like this before. Now, they couldn't see which side had a chance of winning. In response to the various voices below the stage, the people on the stage were even more speechless. Was this kind of battle something they wanted to happen? But still worth a try. It's time to determine the victor. This thought appeared in the minds of the people on the stage at the same time. Come, let me see how strong the young Heavenly King of the Imperial Capital is. The battle erupted again, and this time, it was even more intense and crazy. The four spirit detecting realm cultivators fiercely exchanged blows. Fierce winds blew, and spiritual power surged and collided like a flood. Even the fluctuations that leaked out made many people pale. Was this a battle between true experts? It was too terrifying. Even those who had completed bone strengthening would be killed by the aftermath of the battle. This was not a level they could come into contact with. Qin Feng relaxed. Although he was a little shocked, he quickly felt relieved. In the Sky Palace, other than Tang Ke, Mo Feng and Qian Yan were probably the first to complete bone strengthening. They had accumulated enough, and with the help of the bone strengthening pill, it was indeed possible for them to break through to the spirit detecting realm. He, Jin Yan, and Zhou Yin were also in a life and death battle. The grievances between the two sides were already irreconcilable. They could only fight to the death until the other side was defeated or even killed. Boom! Qin Feng punched out with both his fists. Borrowing the gap of the pause earlier, he once again executed the summoning technique. The roars of dragons and tigers surged out, forming a spiral shape that intertwined with each other as they shot towards Zhou Yin, sending him flying. The dragon came from the clouds, and the tiger came from the wind. When the dragon and tiger met, the wind and clouds surged, and a terrifying power erupted. This was what Qin Feng had comprehended in the battle, and its power was even more extreme. Zhou Yin was not a match and was sent flying. Golden annihilation light. Suddenly, Jin Yan's cold shout came from above. A golden light beam containing terrifying power shot out. One could clearly see the space at the top of the light beam violently distorting. Heavens, it's actually the golden annihilation light. This is the heaven art level. It's said that a great figure of the Jin clan used this move to pierce through a terrifying 5th-rank spirit beast. Its power is too terrifying. Someone exclaimed in shock. This Qin Feng will definitely die this time. The fact that Jin Yin was able to cultivate it in the bone-strengthening realm was enough to prove his talent. Although Jin Yin can't display the true power of the golden annihilation light, it shouldn't be a problem for him to kill Qin Feng, someone said confidently. After all, the difference between the heaven art level and the earth art level was like heaven and earth. At this moment, Qin Feng's heart skipped a beat. His skin tensed as he sensed danger. This golden light was enough to pierce through any expert under the spirit detecting realm. Taking a deep breath, Qin Feng's eyes suddenly became sharp. A strange light appeared in his eyes, and his hands began to form seals mechanically. 10,000 Beast Summoning Technique. Descent of the Black Tortoise. A hoarse voice slowly came from Qin Feng's mouth. Above him, the space suddenly began to ripple, and a figure with a desolate aura slowly appeared. It was a huge tortoise with a transparent shell. When it appeared, one could vaguely see the ferocious tortoise head. At its tail, there seemed to be a huge python coiled up. Chapter 231. Everyone has their own victory and defeat. Boom! At the same time, the golden light beam, accompanied by Jin Yan's cry, also rushed over. Suddenly, a huge roar broke out, like a volcanic eruption. Shocking heat waves crazily rushed out from the tortoise shell. He actually blocked it. Someone couldn't help but cry out in shock, because under the gaze of countless people, the golden light gradually dissipated, and from beginning to end, it didn't break through the tortoise shell's defense. Seeing this scene, Jin Yan's face was also surging with shock. His move had consumed a lot of his spiritual energy, and its power was unparalleled. How could he block it if he didn't reach the psychic realm? How could Qin Feng block it? After blocking Jin Yan's peerless attack, Qin Feng didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief. His heart skipped a beat, and he turned his head to look at Zhou Lian. "Why don't you try to block my attack too?" Zhou Lian sneered, his eyes cold. Immediately, he pushed out his palms, and endless blue waves swept over, turning into a vast sea. The waves of several feet high swept over. Heart-devouring wave. It's the heart-devouring wave, which is also a heaven-level combat skill. Sure enough, the 8 heavenly kings are extraordinary. Someone lamented, and a strong sense of powerlessness rose in his heart. How could they catch up with such an outstanding figure? Blocking Jin Yan's attack has already consumed a lot of his spiritual energy. This time, he definitely can't block Zhou Lian's attack, someone said confidently. It's said that the heart-devouring wave not only has amazing attack power, but also can affect people's spirit, making the opponent in a trance during the battle, and thus be killed. In this way, the winner of this round should be decided. Many people sneered, as if they saw the dawn of victory. Looking at the blue energy wave that was like a real sea wave rushing over, Qin Feng's eyes were dignified. His body shook, and the tortoise shell disappeared. A pair of light wings stretched out from his back, but this time they were no longer transparent, but slightly golden. Screech! There seemed to be a faint phoenix cry, and immediately, a huge, illusory giant shadow appeared with its wings spread out. Its wings were more than 10 meters wide. At this moment, the blue energy wave also surged over like a tsunami, drowning the place, including the giant shadow. The waves rolled, and the clear sound of flowing water could be heard. The blue waves continued to surge, releasing a terrifying power. This place was boiling. Spiritual energy wreaked havoc. Light and shadows flickered, and space distorted. Countless people widened their eyes and stared at the scene, afraid that they would miss something exciting. "He's not dead, is he?" The 9th princess stared at the crystal ball and muttered worriedly. "You can't block it just like that? How boring." The 7th prince looked at the screen and sneered. Qin Feng was in the middle of the blue energy tide. His surroundings were filled with blue light. It was as if a tidal wave was pressing down on him. That kind of power was enough to crush an ordinary complete bone, strengthening expert. Even Qin Feng felt that his body was under a lot of pressure. Rumble. Suddenly, a violent explosion rang out. Everyone's gaze shifted to the stage where Shui Hu and Qian Yan were fighting. Terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations erupted from the stage. The battle between the two of them is about to end. A thunderous sound rang out in the sky above the huge square. It was like the fury of the thunder god, causing people's hearts to tremble in fear. After the loud sound, the energy collision was like a volcanic eruption. The two incomparably ferocious energies came into contact with each other in the air and released their respective terrifying energies. Suddenly, a gust of wind appeared in the sky above the square and whistled past. At the place where the two collided, even the illusory air was blurry and distorted due to the powerful energy collision. As the gust of wind whistled past, the energy shockwave exploded in the sky. It was like a heavenly fire had descended, and it swept towards the direction of the two people on the stage. A figure flew out from the shockwave. When the crowd recognized that it was Qian Yin, they suddenly burst into cheers. Finally, they won the first round. Rumble. Qian Yin heavily smashed onto the edge of the stage. His body was covered in blood, and his aura was weak. He struggled to get up, but there was a trace of a gratified smile on his face. As the terrifying shockwave slowly dissipated, the scene inside the arena appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Heavenly King Shui, who is still standing. We won, Ugh. Before the people from the Imperial City could finish their sentence, they saw Shui, who fall heavily onto the ground. Then, their gazes changed as they looked at Qian Yin. Shui, who was severely injured and unconscious, while Qian Yin could still barely stand. The outcome of the battle was obvious. The 8 heavenly kings were the first to lose a round. However, before the Saint Ruin could rejoice, Song Lin and Zhao Tiannan were sent flying out of the stage. The severely injured heavenly king had used all his strength to defeat the two of them. Just like that, the Saint Ruin won a round, while the Imperial City won 2 rounds consecutively. They were in the lead with a score of 2-1. At this stage of the battle, the outcome of each stage was about to be decided. Another loud sound rang out, and Tang Rant's battle came to an end. She won by half a move and blasted the female heavenly king out of the stage. 2-2, both sides were tied. The faces of the Imperial City's higher-ups were quite gloomy. Although they won 2 rounds, none of the top students of the Imperial City were fine. This went against their original intention. Gong Xiaoxi and Lucio Deceives the Frost battle also ended. Both of them were proficient in spiritual power, so compared to the others who were battered and exhausted, their image was slightly better. It's actually a draw. Surprisingly, the two of them did not decide a winner and ended in a draw. Both sides won 2 rounds each and tied 1 round. It was still a draw. The restless crowd quietened down slightly, and everyone stared at the remaining 2 stages of the battle. 2 battles, 3 rounds. This was related to the final outcome. Lung Wu and Mo Feng's battle is about to be decided. Everyone watched nervously. On the stage, Mo Feng and Lung Wu stood in the air, facing each other from a distance. Both of them were releasing extremely terrifying spiritual power. In front of Mo Feng, golden spiritual power whistled and turned into a huge golden hand. As soon as the hand appeared, it set off a golden storm. On the other hand, Lung Wu slowly separated, and an extremely small black line slowly appeared. A trace of sharp cutting intent slowly filled the air, seeing the black line between Lung Wu's hands. Mo Feng's eyes suddenly focused, and he actually felt an indescribable pressure. He suppressed that feeling, and his spiritual power gathered towards the golden hand like a tide. Golden Buddha hand. The golden hand carried an incomparably violent energy as it fiercely slapped towards Lung Wu. The latter's face was calm, and the distance between his hands gradually increased. The black line also rapidly increased, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a black light that was more than 2 feet long. Go! Void Sky Burial. The black glow broke through the air in a lightning-like manner. Threads of black energy seeped out wherever it passed, causing the enormous rocks on the ground to be cut into numerous crack lines that were difficult to see with the naked eye. That sharp cutting aura caused quite a number of people to tremble in fear when they saw it. On the square, the golden light covered half the sky, and the deep black light was like a crescent moon as it shot out. Both of them contained an extremely sharp aura, and as they passed, the space around them rippled, causing cracks to appear. The terrifying destructive power caused the faces of the people in the stands to be filled with shock and fear. It was hard for them to imagine that someone who had just entered the spirit detection realm could release such a terrifying attack. If it was a normal spirit detection realm expert, just a trace of energy would have been enough to seriously injure them. Chapter 232. Another tide of war amidst the golden and deep black radiance reflected in countless eyes. Two extremely terrifying attacks were about to collide with a loud bang, like a meteor collision. As the two got closer and closer, everyone's hearts couldn't help but be on edge. Who would emerge victorious in such a terrifying battle? This was also related to whether the capital city or the St. Riuin would be in the lead. While everyone's hearts were filled with anticipation and uneasiness, the large golden hand and the deep black glow finally collided violently in the air in the next instant. After the golden light left his body, Mo Feng's entire body seemed to have collapsed. His face was as white as paper and his body swayed. If not for the long blade in his hand touching the ground, he probably wouldn't have been able to stabilize his body. Clearly, the attack this time had completely squeezed out the last trace of spiritual energy in his body. Compared to Mo Feng, Lung Wu wasn't any better. However, at the moment when the two energies collided, a strange smile suddenly appeared on his face. Countless gazes were fixed in the air. For a moment, the entire arena was waiting for the result of the collision between the two terrifying and destructive energies. Under everyone's gazes, the two terrifying energies finally collided. As a result, the heavens and earth suddenly fell silent. Then, the earth trembled violently and a terrifying energy storm swept out. The golden light and the black light devoured each other and toward each other. Everyone stared fixedly at the scene, not even blinking their eyes. As the energies collided, the shock waves from the collision that attracted everyone's attention gradually weakened. Another draw? Everyone was astonished. The two of them didn't manage to defeat each other. Furthermore, looking at their weakened state, it was obvious that they didn't have the strength to continue fighting. How is this possible? Heavenly King Lung Wu has the best title among the 8 heavenly kings. The people from the capital city couldn't accept this. Whoosh! However, just when everyone thought it was a draw, an unforeseen event happened. Lung Wu, whose aura was weak, suddenly trembled. His spiritual energy actually recovered at a terrifying speed. Mo Feng's pupils shrank. How is this possible? He could clearly feel that Lung Wu was in the same situation as him. In less than a minute, he had recovered more than half of his spiritual energy. Lung Wu, Heavenly King Wei Wu, kill that slave. The people of the imperial capital shouted excitedly. Although they did not understand why, no one pursued the matter. They only wanted to see the people of St. Ruin get trampled under their feet. Ha! Lung Wu smiled at Mo Feng. Mo Feng's scalp went numb as he desperately gathered his spirit energy. The latter merely glanced at him indifferently before shifting his gaze to Qin Feng's ring. Knowing what Lung Wu was thinking, Mo Feng's heart sank. He hadn't been defeated yet. Lung Wu had the qualifications to make a move against Qin Feng. If that was the case, things would be extremely dangerous. He took a deep breath and said, "Do you really think I don't have the strength to fight?" Lung Wu looked at him in surprise, then glanced at Qin Feng's ring. Then he smiled and said, "Although you're no longer a threat, people like you who go crazy regardless of everything can't be ignored. Fine, the two of them should be able to win. I'll kill you first." Within the blue wave, Qin Feng also sensed Mo Feng's situation and became anxious. In this situation, Mo Feng would definitely die if he went all out. Just as he was feeling anxious, he suddenly felt dizzy. His head felt like it was about to explode, causing him to lose focus for a moment. "Wake up!" Qin Feng roared. The spirit energy in the spiritual coffin madly poured out to protect his body. Dense crystal light dots appeared on the surface of his body. At the same time, countless blue arrows that resembled small snakes shot toward him and hit his body, making clanking sounds. A few of them even left bloody marks on his body. The crystal light dots only disappeared when the small blue snakes disappeared. Qin Feng heaved a sigh of relief. Looks like this blue wave of energy can interfere with one's spirit. He sighed. He had used the spirit energy in the spiritual coffin in time. He had been in danger just now. At this moment, under his deliberate defense, the dizziness in his mind gradually subsided. Oomph. He snorted coldly and no longer held back. He activated the 100 Calamity Heaven Devouring incantation and released his devouring power. The blue energy could be seen with the naked eye slowly melting away. Zhou Yin sneered at first, then calmed down. Finally, the corner of his mouth twitched. As the blue energy wave disappeared, the scene inside was exposed to the crowd. Immediately, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths sounded one after another. This guy could still defend? And it was intact. Oh no! Some of the stronger people's expressions changed. They had a bad feeling. Even a few people in the judges' seats looked gloomy. The situation in this arena was beyond their expectations. They were getting a little out of control. This battle was related to the outcome of 2 rounds. It was very significant. Qin Feng twisted his neck and looked at the 2 people. They looked a little pale. It was obvious that they had used up a lot of energy. Now, it's my turn to attack. Boom! The spirit energy in the spiritual coffin poured out like a tide. It vibrated in the air and condensed into a spirit array. In an instant, tiger roars sounded, shaking heaven and earth. At this moment, everyone's expression changed. They had forgotten that Qin Feng was a beginner upper spirit master. He had not used it in the previous battles, so no one thought about it. Now that he was using it, it made people feel a chill in their hearts. Jin Yin and Zhou Yin had used up a lot of energy, but Qin Feng had not used up much of his spirit energy. Even if it was 1 against 2, he still had the upper hand. At this moment, Flower Demon and some of the higher-ups in the Saint Ruin finally understood why Qin Feng had not used his spirit energy when the 2 of them were in a tough battle. In a situation where the 2 of them were lacking in spirit energy, there was a high chance that they could turn the situation around with the addition of spirit energy. Roar! The substantial roar of a tiger surged out and turned into a black tiger with a murderous aura. The tiger's aura rippled. This was the most powerful spirit array in the Saint Ruin, the ferocious tiger array. The ferocious tiger was used for killing and was most suitable for battle. The corners of Jin Yin and Zhou Yin's mouths twitched violently. They looked at each other and crazily urged the spirit energy in their bodies to merge into a huge spirit energy shield. It was also at this moment that the black tiger let out a furious roar. With a ferocious aura, it charged towards the 2 of them. Boom! When the black tiger exploded, the spirit energy shield that the 2 of them created together also exploded. The 2 of them were shocked, and their faces turned pale as they staggered back. Whoosh! Qin Feng appeared in front of the 2 of them with a whoosh. His palm, which was filled with tyrannical fluctuations, fiercely slammed into their chests and fiercely spread out, directly exploding out from their backs. This attack caused the 2 of them to instantly lose their fighting strength. When the 2 of them were about to be sent flying by the force, Qin Feng's hands reached out to their throats at lightning speed and lifted them up. Chapter 233. Undercurrents surging the entire stands were silent. Countless people stared at this scene with their eyes wide open. Their hearts couldn't help but tremble. 2 heavenly kings working together were defeated by him, and he was even holding them in his hands like they were little chicks. Just how terrifying was this Qin Feng? Without a doubt, no other battle was as impactful as this. This was a 1 versus 2 battle, and he even captured both of them alive. This was simply an invincible young god of war. At this time, Mo Feng couldn't hold on any longer. He was also caught by Lung Wu, but he didn't show any fear. He had a carefree smile on his face. He had stalled his opponents and bought enough time for Qin Feng. Even if he died now, he had completed his mission. They had won 4 and drawn 1, obtaining an absolute victory. The judge's stand was gloomy. Even the sound of wood cracking could be heard. The battle between Saint Ryuin and the imperial capital had been decided. Saint Ryuin had taken the lead and won against the imperial capital. This was hard for everyone in the imperial capital to accept. Those were the 8 heavenly kings respected by the younger generation. No one had expected this result, even with all of them moving out. Qin Feng held the weak Jin Yin and Zhou Yin. He looked at Lung Wu and said, "You kill one, I kill two. Or 1 life for 1 life. 1 life for 2. Lung Wu said coldly. Good. Qin Feng didn't hesitate. He let go of the 2 and said to Lung Wu, "It's your turn." The latter was silent for a moment. Then he sighed and let go of Mo Feng. "I really want to fight with you. Wait until I break through to the spirit detecting realm. If you don't want to live, I can send you on your way. Right now, we are not on the same level, so don't pretend to be weak in front of me." Lung Wu stared at Qin Feng indifferently, then turned to leave. They had lost to Saint Ryuin with 3 wins and 1 draw. They had lost to Saint Ryuin. Out of the 8 heavenly kings, 4 of them had been taken by Saint Ryuin. The loss of face was small, but it was a sin that they had let the imperial capital's plan go down the drain. Even if the imperial capital did not punish them, their reputation would be greatly affected. It was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. 4 heavenly king thrones had changed owners in a single day. This was like a dream. How could they believe it? Since ancient times, very few people had succeeded in challenging the great heavenly king, let alone losing 4 of them at once. This was the first time the position of great heavenly king had changed hands so many times since it was established. The most unacceptable thing was that it was not one of their own, but their sworn enemy, a lowly slave in Saint Ryuin's guise. Heavens, am I dreaming? Many people howled in grief, unable to accept all of this. The legend of the heavenly king's invincibility was ended, and the thoughts in their hearts completely collapsed. They did not have the slightest bit of hope. Only now did they realize that the 8 heavenly kings were not so high and mighty that they could not be defeated. Today, they had been defeated. The younger generation of the imperial capital had been defeated. They had been defeated by the slaves they looked down on. Many people cried bitterly and felt their faces turn red. They could not raise their heads in front of the slaves. The big shots who used various methods to spy on this place were all dumbfounded and speechless. This blow was too great. Not only did they fail to kill a top student of Saint Ryuin, but they also lost a great deal of face. They had lost 4 heavenly king thrones for no reason at all. It was truly a double loss. The legend of the heavenly king's invincibility has been shattered. No one had expected this outcome. Many people were still in a daze. It was too mythical and too surreal. We won. Haha, we won. This silence lasted for more than 10 seconds. Then, the whole square boiled over. Earth-shaking roars and cheers resounded through the sky. Countless slaves were so excited that their eyes were brimming with tears. They had been oppressed, ridiculed, and ridiculed. No one thought highly of them. But today, they had turned the tables. They had given those who looked down on them a heavy slap in the face. The 8 heavenly kings were known as the 8 strongest youths in the primitive land. But today, they had been defeated. They had been defeated in front of a top student of Saint Ryuin. 2 of the heavenly kings had been suppressed and held in the hands of others without any dignity. There was no doubt that this would cause a huge uproar in the primitive land. Countless enslaved people shouted excitedly, venting their hot-bloodedness. Who dared to say that slaves were inferior to humans? So what if the imperial capital had enslaved them? In the end, there is still a place in this land where even the imperial capital could not gain any benefits. That was the land of hope for all slaves, the land of yearning, the only pure land, Saint Ryuin. Earth-shaking roars resounded through the sky. At this time, Qin Feng and the others deeply understood that other people's words were not as good as seeing it with their own eyes. The worship and respect in the eyes of the slaves for Saint Ryuin would only appear in front of Saint Ryuin's absolute strength. This undoubtedly made all the slaves in the primitive land respect and reverence for Saint Ryuin even more. If you lose the hearts of the people, you lose the world. On the other hand, If you win the hearts of the people, you also win the world. This was why Saint Ryuin had to compete with the imperial capital. This outcome was beyond the expectations of the imperial capital. At the referees' table, all the important figures who were paying attention to this place looked very gloomy. The Heavenly King challenge ended quickly. The ceremony was very simple. It was over with a simple announcement. The ending ceremony was a little simple. It was not as grand as before. But even so, the news still spread in the shortest time possible. Immediately, everyone in the imperial capital fell into a daze. Those who thought of themselves as nobles could not accept all this. Soon, the news spread wider and faster. Everyone outside the imperial capital knew about it. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100. In just a few days, most of the people in the primitive land knew the result of the Battle of Crowning King. Of course, this was the result of Saint Ryuin's intention. Otherwise, with the imperial capital secretly interfering, it was very likely that the news would not have spread. The whole country rejoiced. All the enslaved people in the primitive land were celebrating this crazy day. However, after the celebration, all the big and small forces in the primitive land calmed down. But under the calm, there was an additional trace of a dignified atmosphere, especially among the upper echelons. Many people were deeply worried. They actually achieved such impressive results. Some of the upper echelons of Saint Ryuin were stunned. Then, their expressions became heavy. Send people to secretly bring them back. In less than 2 months, the heavenly road will open. Let them quickly ascend the heavenly road. The upper echelons of Saint Ryuin discussed together and decided to let them return first. They would ascend the heavenly road and ask for permission to leave this place. Otherwise, they would be in danger of dying young. Contact people from all sides and ask them to provide assistance on the way. We must bring all of them back. Saint Ryuin, as well as other enslaved forces, some super cities, big and small towns, and even villages all moved. They sent out a large number of experts to hide around the imperial capital. They hit on several important roads on the way back. Chapter 234. Trouble. Meanwhile, in the imperial capital, the atmosphere was especially gloomy these 2 days. Many people were dejected because they still hadn't walked out from the shock. 3 days later, Qin Feng, Flower Demon, Tang Ran, and Xian Yan, who had successfully challenged the Heavenly King throne, finally entered the Divine Ability Hall of the Imperial family as they wished. This was their first privilege after becoming a Heavenly King. They could learn any battle skill in the Divine Abilities Hall, or take away any magic treasure. Even Saint Ryuin couldn't compare to the collection of the Imperial family. All of them had gained something from it. Qin Feng did not choose any battle techniques. He had quite a number of trump cards, some of which were comparable to the Heaven Art tier, so he did not care about 1 or 2. The Divine Ability Hall had a total of 3 levels. The first level was mostly filled with ordinary cultivation techniques, battle skills, and some treasures. The collection on the second floor was quite rich, and the quality of the combat skills and various treasures had also improved. However, Qin Feng was not interested in any of them because he wanted to get a flying Dharma treasure. Even Saint Ryuin did not have many of these Dharma treasures. However, he did not find such a magic treasure here. Qin Feng was unwilling to give up. He wanted to go to the 3rd level, but he was told that the 3rd level was forbidden. The 3rd level was considered the core of the royal family's collection. Apart from those who had made great contributions to the royal family, no one was allowed to enter. Qin Feng had no choice but to wander around the 2nd floor and randomly pick one. Yes. However, just as he was looking at the pitch-black sword in front of him, his eyes suddenly locked onto a spot. There was an object that was alternating between black and white. Walking over, Qin Feng frowned and looked at the 2-colored object. It was shaped like a square pyramid, about the size of a palm, and looked like it was carved out of an ordinary stone. However, there were some naturally formed vein patterns on it. The color was simple and unadorned, and some of the edges and corners were worn down as if they had been eroded by the passage of time. This was originally an ordinary treasure, but who asked it to be black and white, which he liked. He was traumatized by these two colors. This thing looks very ordinary. How can it be qualified to be placed on the second floor? Qin Feng picked it up and looked at it carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly. At the bottom of the stone peak, there were 3 large words that were simple and unadorned but contained Taoist rhyme. Savage Peak. These 3 words seemed to have been engraved, but they also seemed to have been formed naturally. Qin Feng couldn't understand them at the moment. He could only put them away and then went to the registration room. Cultivating a battle skill or taking away a magic treasure was the privilege of a heavenly king. Young man, are you sure you want to choose this treasure? The registration elder's expression was cold as he spoke. Yes. Qin Feng nodded. After registering, the 4 of them met up and left the Supernatural Abilities Hall. Although the Saint Ruin Heavenly Kings could provide them with protection, it was not absolute. After all, this was the imperial capital. Moreover, they had all rejected the olive branches thrown out by various forces, which undoubtedly harmed the interests of some people. However, just as they were about to leave the palace and pass through the last checkpoint, a row of armored guards walked towards them. There's a missing treasure in the palace. You guys stop and get checked. A cold and emotionless voice sounded, causing the expressions of those people to change. We suspect that you guys are related to the theft of a national treasure. Please get checked. A row of soldiers, holding spears, surrounded Qin Feng and the other 3. The leader of the soldiers said coldly. Although the 4 of them knew that the other party was deliberately looking for trouble, they didn't dare to do anything. They could only let the soldiers go forward and check. The 4 soldiers went forward to search them. At first, they were very obedient, but soon they felt that something was wrong. The spiritual energy in the other party's body was surging. Whoosh! Qin Feng, Qian Yan, and Tang ran decisively retreat at a distance. Only the flower demon couldn't stand it. Not only was she treated rudely, but she also suffered some dirty tricks from the other party. Get lost! She immediately sent out a palm strike, causing the other party to retreat. However, at this moment, a terrifying scene happened. The chest of the soldier who was pushed back by the flower demon suddenly exploded, and then he fell to the ground, dead on the spot. One of the soldiers died on the spot, and the rest of the soldiers immediately changed their expressions. Their spears glowed with a cold light as they locked onto Qin Feng and the other 3. You guys dare to kill the palace's soldiers. How audacious. In the distance, a few people walked over, all of them emitting a powerful aura. What's going on? Qin Feng and the others frowned and looked at the flower demon. This guy's hands and feet are not following the rules. The flower demon said with a gloomy face, but I didn't hit him hard at all. They're deliberately looking for a reason to keep us here. Tang Ran's pretty face was serious as he said in a low voice. The people who walked over were obviously of high status. They were all commanders and above, and they were very powerful. They stared at Qin Feng and the others with unfriendly expressions. Deputy General Zhang, we were doing a routine check, but they relied on their young heavenly kings and Saint Ruin people to kill one of our soldiers. Commander Li pointed at the flower demon and said with grief and indignation. The middle-aged man, who was called Deputy General Zhang, looked at the soldier on the ground and finally cast his cold gaze on Qin Feng and the other 3. He said in a cold voice, although you guys are young heavenly kings, you don't have the right to abuse your power in the palace. Men, arrest them all. Deputy General Zhang, there must be some misunderstanding. Our people didn't hit him hard. Qian Yin said. Oh, you're saying that what we saw was fake? Commander Li suddenly shouted and pointed at his companion on the ground. All of us here saw that she pushed our brother away with one palm, and then he died. Do you dare say that it has nothing to do with you? Qin Feng and the others' faces sank. On the surface, it was indeed the flower demon who made the first move. The so-called unruly hands and feet were deliberately forced by the other party to make a move so that they would have a chance to talk. Deputy General Zhang, this matter, I have my own decision. Deputy General Zhang waved his hand and interrupted Qin Yan. He walked forward and checked for a while. He frowned and said, he was indeed killed by a strong force that broke his meridians. What else do you have to say? I didn't use any strength. The flower demon said in a low voice. Then how do you explain his death? Commander Zhang pointed at the corpse on the ground and asked. The flower demon was about to refute, but Qin Feng stopped her. I shook his head slightly. The latter snorted and turned her head away, ignoring him. Seeing that she didn't say anything, Deputy General Zhang sneered and said, We will investigate the truth of the matter. Now, please cooperate with our investigation. Take them back first. Deputy General Zhang ordered. Yes. Several soldiers walked forward. Wait. At this time, Qin Feng stepped forward and said, Deputy General Zhang, maybe we were reckless and accidentally killed someone, but since you killed someone, there is no but. Although you are the savior of the ninth princess, merits are merits, demerits are demerits. You can't be compared. If you have merits, it is our emperor who rewarded you. But if you have demerits, it is us who punished you. Merits cannot offset demerits. Deputy General Zhang waved his hand and said coldly, Arrest them all. But at this time, another group of soldiers came from the distance. The leader was wearing a similar armor as Deputy General Zhang. That person walked over with a frosty face. Deputy General Zhang, you have big guts. Who gave you the right to overstep the rules? Chapter 235. Parting Deputy General Yanlong. They killed one of my soldiers. Don't tell me that I don't even have the right to ask. Deputy General Zhang said with a gloomy face. When the time comes, I will give you all an explanation for this matter. However, right now, I will be taking away all the people related to this matter, Yanlong said. Deputy General Yanlong, there are some things that you shouldn't meddle in. Be careful not to get yourself into trouble. The Lord behind you may not be able to protect you. Deputy General Zhang said in a low voice. Fiery Dragon sneered and said, I only do what I have to do. I have a clear conscience. What happened? Qin Feng asked in a low voice. The guards of the palace were actually fighting among themselves. This was not in line with common sense. This matter was obviously a trick of the royal family. Why would the guards help them? Yanlong used to be a student of Saint Ruin, whispered the flower demon. Hearing this, Qin Feng understood. No wonder the other party was willing to help them. He didn't believe it before, but now he did. The people who came from Saint Ruin were officials and generals in the imperial capital. They would indeed bring some benefits to the people from Saint Ruin. No wonder the imperial capital was so afraid of Saint Ruin. Vice General Zhang's face darkened as he said, Vice General Yanlong, do you really want to meddle in other people's business? Yanlong sneered and said, I will investigate the matter of your soldiers' deaths and give you an explanation. But right now, I need to investigate the theft of the treasures in the palace. I must take the related people away. Deputy General Zhang, farewell. Under Vice General Zhang's gloomy gaze, Fiery Dragon took Qin Feng and the others and left quickly. Every exit out of the palace is guarded. You can't get out. Yanlong said, I will take you to my master first. He will find a way to send you out of the palace. Senior Flame Dragon, we are not afraid of crooked shadows. We are not afraid of their investigation, said the flower demon. Hearing her, Fiery Dragon shook his head and said, Little girl, your strength is not bad. Why are you so stupid? They know that no matter how big the trap is, they can't kill you. They just want to find an excuse to delay you. For this kind of thing, as long as they want to, they can investigate and collect all kinds of evidence. They can drag it out for 3 to 5 months. At that time, you will miss the opportunity to ascend the path to heaven. This is their goal. Hearing this, the few people gasped. They thought that the other party was just looking for trouble and wanted to attack them. They didn't expect it to be like this. My lord has already sent someone to contact Saint Ruin. You must leave the imperial capital immediately. I will take you there now. Thank you, Senior Flame Dragon. Qian Yan and the others hurriedly expressed their gratitude. Senior Yanlong, this is a trap set up by the royal family. Won't the royal family be enraged if your lord tries to stop us? Qin Feng asked. Hee, you underestimate my lord too much. He has a life and death relationship with Lucio Shenba. He has a wide network. It won't be easy to punish him. Moreover, my lord came from Saint Ryuin. It is expected that he would help you. Or rather, it is a phenomenon that everyone knows. Fiery Dragon said with a smile. The imperial capital has placed some people who are on the side of Saint Ryuin by their side. They even have high positions. It is really puzzling. Little guy, you are Qin Feng, right? I saw your battle. You have really made our Saint Ryuin proud. Fiery Dragon showed an admiring expression to Qin Feng. Soon after, he changed the topic and said, however, don't just look at the surface of things. Saint Ryuin produces high-quality experts. The imperial capital needs more experts to help them control the four directions. Naturally, experts also need a place to display their talents. Everyone knows about the secret struggle between the imperial capital and Saint Ryuin. Since we hold important positions, we naturally put the imperial capital's interests first. However, they don't dare to control the Saint Ryuin too much. Little guy, the knack for this is very deep. It is not something that can be explained in 1 or 2 sentences. I can only helplessly tell you that we can only do our best to take care of Saint Ryuin. However, in other aspects, we must put the imperial capital's interests first. This is the reason why we have real power. The 4 of them were confused. They could only say that they understood a little. Fire and water are incompatible, but they blend with each other. They are afraid of each other, but they can't be separated. It's not easy for you guys to maintain this complicated balance. Qin Feng sighed. Fiery Dragon looked at Qin Feng in astonishment, then smiled. Little guy, seems like you've seen the knack for this. You're more suitable for this job. However, you have more important things to do. This place is suitable for you. But since you're here, you've become a villain who doesn't care about the world. Precursor Fiery Dragon, don't worry. I know what I should do. Qin Feng smiled. If I want to be here, I would have been here a long time ago. Fiery Dragon was surprised, then nodded. Seems like the 9th princess had invited you, but you refused. Between the responsibility and your future, you chose the latter. It's a pity, but it's admirable. Compared to what Precursor Fiery Dragon and your master have done, what I have done is nothing. Ha ha! Fiery Dragon burst out laughing. Under his guidance, they soon arrived at his master's headquarters. The decoration of this place was relatively simple, but it had a solemn and righteous atmosphere. This is the clearance pass. Fiery Dragon, take them out. I've taken care of the rest. Cheng Xiong was straightforward. He didn't talk nonsense. Get out of the palace. People of the Saint Ryuin are waiting for you. You kids and the others have to leave. You kids don't need to thank me. Leave here alive. In the future, when you ascend to heaven, that's the best reward for us. Not many people can have this qualification. I've regretted it a lot that year. Cheng Xiong waved his hand. Although we've prepared well, the imperial capital may have some backup. Thus, when you get out of the city, you have to be very careful. They bowed to Cheng Xiong. When they were about to leave, Qin Feng suddenly said, "You guys go first. I still have something to do." Little cutie, you don't want to go with us? The 3 of them looked at him in surprise. The more people we have, the bigger the target. No matter what, we have to be prepared for the worst. So, it's better to go separately. Qin Feng looked at Cheng Xiong. Moreover, I have my connections. In this place, there are at least 2 powerful people who will help me. Senior Cheng, what do you think? Cheng Xiong thought for a while and then nodded. This worry is not unreasonable. It's safer to go separately. Since you have your considerations, and there are some powerful people who will help you, I won't interfere. Little cutie, you have to stay alive. We'll wait for you in the Saint Ryuin. Since Cheng Xiong had agreed, they didn't need to persuade him. The 3 of them knew that this matter couldn't be delayed. They didn't hesitate, leaving with Fiery Dragon. We'll meet in the Saint Ryuin. We'll leave together on the path of heaven. Qin Feng smiled. He didn't know that this departure would be forever. Some people would never see each other again. He also didn't know that this decision of his would bring him endless disasters, forcing him to the path of no return. Chapter 236. Request after they left. Qin Feng handed a letter to Cheng Xiong and sincerely said, "Senior, please take care of some people for me." Coming to the imperial capital, other than representing the Holy Dragon Institute to participate in the battle, he also wanted to know how his clansmen, Xiao Yun, Long Zhan, and Su Qin, were doing after they were conscripted. During this period of time, he had been secretly investigating and had indeed found some people. However, he couldn't go over and meet them. He could only write down the names of some people who were living miserably and hope to find someone with authority to take care of them. However, this matter had happened too suddenly, and he had to leave. He didn't have time to deal with them one by one, so he could only ask Cheng Xiong for help. The latter looked at it and nodded without asking for the reason. "Leave this matter to me. You can leave without worry." "Many thanks, Senior Cheng." Qin Feng earnestly bowed. "Brat, the person you're looking for is the ninth princess, right? However, who was the other person with authority you mentioned?" Cheng Xiong asked. Qin Feng slightly shook his head and said, "Senior Cheng, this matter doesn't only involve Saint Ryuan. I don't want to involve you, so I'll pretend that you never knew about this matter." Hearing this, Cheng Xiong's eyes narrowed. After muttering to himself for a while, he said, "I will only remind you that the ninth princess is a member of the imperial family. For some people and some matters, don't just rely on your intuition. Rational analysis is more important." Qin Feng was startled. Soon after, he earnestly nodded and said, "Senior Cheng, don't worry. I have my ways." After leaving Cheng Xiong's place, Qin Feng's eyes became slightly deep. Soon after, he turned around and walked in a certain direction. Before news of this matter spread, he had to meet someone and make sufficient preparations. After reporting, he arrived at the residence of the ninth princess. "Qin Feng, why are you here?" The ninth princess was slightly surprised, but there was a smile in the corner of her eyes. "I'm leaving, but before I leave, I want to ask you to do two things for me," Qin Feng said softly. "You haven't done what you promised me yet. Why do you want me to help you?" The ninth princess pouted and glanced at him with her big eyes. From his expression, it was obvious that he was scheming again. "The ninth princess, I really need your help. Otherwise, I might not be able to leave this place," Qin Feng said seriously. Seeing him like this, the ninth princess' heart skipped a beat. She said, "You're now a heavenly king and a student of Saint Ruin. Moreover, you're my savior. Imperial Father has already announced to the public that a banquet will be held in the palace in 3 days and that he will reward you handsomely. Who would dare to make a move against you? Holding a banquet is true, and rewarding me is also true. Keeping all of us here is probably the most important thing." He sighed inwardly, shook his head, and said, "Did you forget your fourth brother's warning to me? No matter what the result of the Heavenly King challenge is, we have to leave this place as soon as possible. I'm a member of Saint Ryuan. You saw my performance in the king-conferring battle. If there's someone who fears me the most, guess who it is?" Hearing this, the mockery on the ninth princess' face gradually faded, replaced by anger. Although she was pure and naive, it was not as if she did not know what kind of dark methods existed under the surface of rules and regulations. This was an unspoken rule that had existed since ancient times, and it was not as if she had never seen it before. However, this had happened to Qin Feng, which inexplicably angered her. "Just stay here. I'd like to see who dares to make a move against you," she said in a dignified manner. "You can't protect me for the rest of my life, right?" Qin Feng shook his head and smiled. "Could it be that following by my side and being my guard makes you so unsatisfied?" The ninth princess' tone was faint. Even she herself did not notice that there was a trace of inexplicable resentment in her voice. Everyone has their own things to do. If possible, who wouldn't want to live a peaceful life? Qin Feng said in a low voice. His tone was very calm. "The ninth princess, what you've done for me is enough to repay the favor of saving my life. In the end, you don't owe me anything. Now, I'm the one begging you. I know this is very difficult for you, but in the vast imperial capital, the only person I can beg is you. Where even now, it's understandable that you don't want to help me." The ninth princess stared at him with her big eyes. Her beautiful eyes flashed with light. After a long silence, she said, "What do you need me to do for you?" "First, Secretly send someone to bring my sister Qin Yao to your side. Hide her identity. This is a letter I wrote to her. When the time comes, she won't refuse. Also, help me protect my family while you're at it. I've offended a lot of people during the conferred king battle. I'm worried that the Jin and Zhou clans will vent their anger on my family after failing to take revenge on me. This was one of the important reasons why Qin Feng chose to split up and come to find the ninth princess. He was different from Flower Demon and the others. He still had his family outside, so he couldn't be careless. Although no one said it, everyone knew that the 8 heavenly kings' miserable defeat was mostly because of him. Without him and Gong Xiaoxi working together, the 8 heavenly kings wouldn't have been defeated and injured from the beginning. Without him, Mo Feng and Flower Demon would have died. They wouldn't have been able to win. Without him, they wouldn't have been able to win 2 consecutive victories and help the Saint Ryuin turn the tide. He was the hero of the Saint Ryuin, but he was also the most feared and hated person in the imperial capital. He wasn't afraid of their revenge, but he was worried that someone would take their anger out on his family. After receiving the letter from Qin Feng, the ninth princess asked, "What's the second thing?" Qin Feng pondered for a moment and said softly, "I want to see Lucio Saishu." "Why do you want to see her?" The ninth princess glared at him and said, "Don't tell me you've taken a fancy to her." Qin Feng's forehead was immediately filled with black lines. The ninth princess' thoughts were jumping around too much. "If I really have to choose, everyone knows that you, the ninth princess, are the best choice." Although he was going against his conscience, Qin Feng knew that he still had to flatter her at this time. He didn't want this simple-minded the ninth princess to flip out. Sure enough, after hearing his words, the ninth princess' mood immediately changed. "It's best that I don't let anyone else know that I want to see Lucio Saishu. Of course, I need to reveal it till Lucio deceives the frost without leaving a trace," Qin Feng said. "Why do you want to see her?" The ninth princess looked at Qin Feng in confusion. After thinking for a while, she said, "Qin Feng, that little girl Saishu is abnormal. You'd better stay away from her." "I know, but she's my biggest bargaining chip to leave the imperial capital." "If that's the case, I don't think there's anyone more suitable than me," the ninth princess said narcissistically. "If that's the case, I'm afraid your father will immediately send people to capture me and tear me apart." Qin Feng said indifferently, "There's nothing more serious than kidnapping the ninth princess." The ninth princess rolled her eyes at him and said, "When do you plan to see her?" Qin Feng rubbed his chin and thought for a while. He said, "The sooner the better." After leaving the ninth princess' place, Qin Feng met someone. "Greetings, fourth prince." He bowed respectfully to Xianyuan Owl. "Qin Feng, you shouldn't do this. You're playing with fire," Xianyuan Owl said indifferently as he stared at him. Chapter 237. Eve of the storm. Staring at the calm Qin Feng, Xianyuan Owl frowned slightly. His calm eyes gradually deepened. He said softly, "Although the debt of saving your life is greater than the heavens, she has helped you time and time again. It could be considered even. I hope this is the last time." Letting her go means letting yourself go. Qin Feng's body trembled slightly. He narrowed his eyes and nodded. Ignoring the Xianyuan Owl, Qin Feng immediately returned to his residence. At this time, the news of what had happened in the imperial palace spread. Immediately, it caused quite a commotion. Everyone was talking about it. F***, these slaves are too bold. They actually dared to kill soldiers in public just because they are Saint Ryuin students. We have to punish them severely. They're just a bunch of slaves. They have really forgotten their identities. Qin Feng didn't pay any attention to the various rumors in the outside world. He stayed quietly in his room. Mo Xing and the other higher-ups were also helpless. It was already too late to send Qin Feng away. He warned her seriously, "Be careful. The ninth princess' words may not be trusted." His warning was similar to that of Cheng Xiong, but due to the latter's identity, it was more obscure. The ninth princess was very efficient. In the afternoon, she sent someone to inform him of the meeting location. Qin Feng tidied himself up and washed his face. The cold water made his head clear a lot. As he gazed at his fair and delicate face in the mirror, he smiled faintly. After that, he stopped hesitating and turned around to leave the room. His appearance naturally caused quite a commotion. Many gazes were focused on him. He even vaguely sensed that some great experts were secretly following him. He arrived at the address. It was a courtyard located in the southeast corner, not far from the city gate. This seems to be one of the Lucio family's properties. Many people noticed that Qin Feng had entered the courtyard, and their expressions changed. The great experts who had secretly followed them here were all startled. They quieted down, not daring to enter. The courtyard wasn't very big, but it was very quiet. There was a small bridge, flowing water, and a bamboo forest. It was very peaceful. Under the guidance of a person who looked like a servant, Qin Feng came to a pond. There was a stone pavilion in the distance. 2 figures were sitting in the pavilion. As expected, they still came. Qin Feng smiled as he walked towards the stone pavilion. Handsome big brother. Seeing Qin Feng walking over, Lucio Saishue was overjoyed. Her little face flashed with an excited luster, and her big eyes kept rolling around. She was extremely cute. Sit. However, under the stern eyes of Lucio Deceives Frost, Lucio Saishue could only pout and then sit down. After berating Lucio Saishue, Lucio Qishuang finally turned her gaze to Qin Feng, who was slowly walking over. "Why do you want to see my sister?" she asked directly, her tone indifferent. Handsome Big Shun, Lucio Saishue greeted him softly. However, when she saw Lucio Deceives the Frost looking over, she immediately turned her head away angrily. He smiled at Lucio Saishue. Qin Feng laughed and said, "If you didn't know who I wanted to see, you wouldn't have let her come, and you wouldn't have followed me either. Besides, didn't you want to come into contact with me before?" Lucio Deceives the Frost narrowed her beautiful eyes and stared at Qin Feng. Meeting her gaze, Qin Feng's expression was calm. After a long time, Lucio Deceives the Frost broke the silence and said, "Speak. What do you want?" "I want you to leave the city with me." Qin Feng smiled. Hearing this, Lucio Deceives the Frost smiled faintly. "You want me to be your protective talisman and send you out of the city?" As smart as she was, she naturally understood Qin Feng's intention. It wasn't that she hadn't heard the news from the outside world. It could be said that Qin Feng and the others were at a disadvantage. However, if she were to follow, many people would be afraid. However, if she did that, the Lucio family would be dragged into it. "That's right." Qin Feng nodded with a smile. "I don't think I have a reason to agree." Lucio Deceives the Frost shook her head and said with a faint smile, "If I can keep you, it might be a good decision." Qin Feng narrowed his eyes. What he was doing was indeed a little risky, but she was the most suitable person to send him out of the city. To be able to become one of the 8 heavenly kings, all of them had outstanding abilities. This Lucio Deceives the Frost was able to tie with Gong Xiaoxi, so she was definitely very powerful. Gong Xiaoxi's Profound Sky Array was the strongest defensive spiritual array in the Saint Ryuan. Even his Fierce Tiger Array couldn't do anything to it. Of course, these 2 spiritual arrays were the strongest arrays within the limits of a spirit master at their level. However, Lucio Deceives the Frost was able to break them. Although it was a tie, her strength couldn't be denied. In the same level, Qin Feng didn't fear any spiritual energy cultivator, but he was very afraid of spirit masters because he knew how terrifying this profession was. If Lucio Deceives the Frost were to make things difficult for him now, it would bring him a lot of trouble. He stared at Lucio Deceives the Frost. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "You won't do that. Moreover, you have a reason to leave the city with me. Do you think I'm that stupid to push the Lucio family into the teeth of the storm?" Lucio Deceives the Frost said, "But you don't have a reason to refuse," Qin Feng said softly. At the same time, he shot a glance at Lucio Saishue. Lucio Deceives the Frost narrowed her eyes. After a moment of silence, she suddenly said, "Saishue, go play somewhere else." Lucio Saishue pouted, but didn't dare to resist. She could only leave in a huff. "Say it." Give me a reason why I must help you. Seeing Lucio Saishua leave, Lucio Deceives the Frost said indifferently, "There is a mysterious and powerful force in your sister's body. This force has a certain incubation period. Once it erupts, it will turn her into a monster. Currently, only I can contain it." Qin Feng said. Bang! The cup in Lucio Deceives the Frost's hand shattered with a loud bang. Her sharp eyes locked onto Qin Feng. "Do you know that this rumor of yours is enough to kill you 10,000 times?" Lucio Deceives the Frost said coldly. Hearing this, Qin Feng sneered and said, "You sent people to contact me a few days ago. Didn't you think about why nothing happened to her when she clearly had a relapse that night?" Lucio Deceives the Frost. "You are a smart person. The fact that you can come here means that you believe it." Qin Feng stood up and looked down at Lucio Deceives the Frost. He said, "Also, if you think that this is just a rumor, then pretend that we never met today. Goodbye." After saying that, Qin Feng didn't stay any longer. He turned around and walked out. However, just as he was about to leave the stone pavilion, Lucio Deceives the Frost's voice came from behind him. "Let's go to the secret room to talk." After an hour, Qin Feng left the courtyard. Lucio Deceives the Frost went with him. The two of them went out of the city together, causing quite a stir. At the same time, in a luxurious room, the seventh prince, Xianyuan Owl, listened to his subordinate's report and couldn't help but laugh. They actually managed to invite the Lucio family. This game is getting more and more interesting. He looked to the side and said with a smile, "Third brother, I haven't encountered such an interesting thing in a long time." In another room, 3 young men in golden robes were sitting. "Sixth brother, this is a good opportunity to suppress fourth brother's faction." One of the young men in golden robes said with a smile, There's no hurry. I think seventh brother will be more proactive." The young man in golden robes in the middle smiled faintly. His eyes were full of the luster of calculation. "Sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight." Sixth brother's plan is very good. At the same time, several places were filled with the smell of calculation. Chapter 238. Little Sovereign Su Tiembalucio Deceives the Frost sent Qin Feng far away from the city before parting ways. "Don't forget what you promised me." She stared at Qin Feng and said before parting ways, "Don't worry, I will definitely do what I promised you." Moreover, Qin Feng said with a faint smile, "Whether you believe it or not, I do regard her as a friend. Her pure nature and innocent smiling face are just to cover up the loneliness and helplessness in her heart. She is actually very pitiful." Lucio Deceives the Frost's tender body trembled as she stared at Qin Feng in a daze. This was the first time she had heard such words. "My sister is very lonely," she muttered. Killing people isn't as good as destroying the heart. Similarly, saving people is far from being as good as saving the heart. You guys are merely protecting her people. Qin Feng spoke. He didn't stay behind and continued flying forward, disappearing into the mountains. Lucio Deceives the Frost didn't come back to her senses until his figure had disappeared for a long time. "Perhaps we are only able to protect her people," she muttered, her tone filled with unspeakable bitterness and helplessness. "But if there's really a way, how can we only be like this? All the major forces have sent people to kill you. Even the imperial family has sent people. I hope you can survive." Lucio Deceives the Frost took a deep look at the direction Qin Feng disappeared. Then she turned around and left. "You should know that the more dazzling your performance is, the more the imperial capital won't allow you to ascend the path to heaven, especially you." As the daughter of the Lucio family and one of the 8 heavenly kings, she naturally knew a lot. Such outstanding people would definitely ascend the path to heaven. So, how could the imperial capital allow them to return safely? After separating from Lucio Deceives the Frost, Qin Feng didn't head towards the imperial capital. Instead, he deliberately took a detour. When the two left the city, he clearly saw some traces of battle. Without a doubt, those were people sent by the forces outside the imperial capital to welcome them. However, it was clear that those people were either killed or forced to retreat. Qin Feng had already expected that the people of the imperial capital would act quickly. Let's hope they can leave successfully. He sighed softly and purposely stayed for half a day in order to attract the attention of those people and give them more opportunities to escape. Just like in normal times, there would be conflicts between the various forces, but in terms of welcoming them, they would all put aside their grudges and work together. He needed to make some preparations before he left. This was something he had to do. Those were all additional. If you have time to worry about others, why don't you think about yourself instead? Suddenly, a cold voice was heard, and a middle-aged man walked out of the forest. "You think you can stop me by yourself?" said Qin Feng coldly. His opponent was only at the peak of the late bone, strengthening realm. He couldn't pose much of a threat to him. In order to kill you, how could this be all I have?" The middle-aged man sneered and waved his arm. 4 or 5 figures appeared in the jungle. The weakest one was at the late stage of bone, strengthening realm. "Which faction are you from? Go ask the King of Hell." The middle-aged man shouted coldly and rushed forward with the other 5. While Qin Feng was dealing with a few people, he was also observing the surrounding environment, looking for a way to escape. The battle was quite fierce. These people were completely out to kill, and they didn't even have the thought of capturing him alive. Ferocious spiritual energy fluctuations wreaked havoc, destroying everything in the surroundings. Anything that stood in the way was completely destroyed. After fighting for a while, Qin Feng was sure that these people didn't know the inside story. They were just after the high reward. He decisively killed them. Bang, 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 figures were sent flying. Their hearts were shattered by a strong force in the air. They couldn't be more dead. How can he be so strong? The middle-aged man was dumbfounded. This person was at the same level as them, but his strength was abnormally strong. In his opinion, he was fully qualified to challenge the 8 heavenly kings. Are the students of the Saint Ryuan so strong? He was shocked. Indeed, he wasn't in the city. He was carrying out a mission outside. He just received an order from the organization to stop the people who escaped from the city at all costs. He didn't know what happened at the Celestial Dynasty pageant. After taking care of these people, Qin Feng didn't stay any longer and quickly left. He changed directions once again, leaving the capital and the Saint Ryuan. It was clear that the various paths leading to the Saint Ryuan were intercepted by the capital. It was impossible to go back through the main path. However, he still underestimated the determination of these people to kill him. Even though he took another path, he was still ambushed by several groups of people. When the 4th ambush team was wiped out, he also suffered heavy injuries. This was because there were people half a step into the spirit detecting realm among them. If they hadn't been outside the city and didn't know the inside story, he wouldn't have been so relaxed. A slave is actually so hard to kill. Suddenly, there was a light laugh. Qin Feng's heart jumped. He quickly turned his head and stared at the person who had come. This was a young man in his mid-20s. He was clad in white robes and was extremely handsome and elegant. His steps were very slow, but every time his foot landed, there would be a flash of light. With a single step, he covered over 10 meters and soon arrived before Qin Feng. "Who are you?" Qin Feng asked. This person's aura didn't leak out, but he could keenly sense that this young man was extremely dangerous. "Su Tianbu. You might not know this name, but I think you should know another name, the 3rd young sovereign," Su Tianbu said with a smile. Qin Feng's pupil shrank. He was the famous 3rd young sovereign of the capital. He had long since stepped into the spirit-detecting realm. He was a peak expert of a younger generation. "Also, you should know Yu Huatian. His luck was very bad and he died at my hands," Su Tianbu said with a chuckle. Hearing this, Qin Feng's heart trembled. He knew about the spirit-detecting realm battle. It was also a part of the King Bestowment pageant. However, it was carried out secretly and wasn't announced to the public, so he didn't know the results. However, he had now received news that Yu Huatian had died at his hands. This Su Tianbu's strength was a bit too strong. Qin Feng hadn't officially fought with Yu Huatian, but he had challenged Qin Feng and Gong Xiaoxi's yin-yang fusion formation. Neither side could do anything to the other. However, Such an expert had died at Su Tianbu's hands. It was clear how strong this person was. Tang Ke and Zhou Yin, only the three of them were qualified to challenge the third young sovereign of the capital. Yu Huatian had died, so what about the other two? Qin Feng took a deep breath. Now wasn't the time to worry about this. His expression was extremely grave. In a head-on battle, it didn't matter how many tricks he had. Suddenly, he quickly retreated and used the dragon's swimming body. His figure streaked across the sky as he quickly escaped. After using it a few times, he appeared in a small valley 1,000 meters away. At the same time, Su Tianbu descended from the sky and landed not far in front of him. Chapter 239. The old man reappears. Qin Feng slowly retreated. With a flip of his palm, a golden talisman appeared. It was engraved with many complicated patterns that rippled with spiritual energy. He flicked his finger and threw the talisman in front of Su Tianbu. With a soft shout, the talisman bloomed with golden light and exploded. Spiritual talisman. At this moment, Su Tianbu, who was smiling, had a drastic change in expression. He suddenly activated his spiritual energy defense. Boom! The spiritual talisman exploded, and a terrifying shockwave instantly wreaked havoc in this narrow space. Even the energy of heaven and earth was drawn over, causing a huge explosion here. When the energy gradually dissipated, the situation inside was gradually exposed to Qin Feng. He was hiding under a huge rock in the distance. When he saw this scene, his pupils couldn't help but shrink. This was a spiritual talisman that could kill a spiritual detecting realm expert. Su Tianbu was actually fine, and even his hair wasn't messed up. How was this possible? Pucci. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, Su Tianbu's body trembled. His face instantly paled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. So you're just putting up a strong front. Qin Feng laughed as he walked out. You're despicable. Su Tianbu coldly stared at Qin Feng. Even though he was heavily injured, his killing intent was still overflowing. You're one level higher than me. Isn't it despicable to kill me? Qin Feng sneered. Good, very good. Su Tianbu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and the dissipated spiritual energy once again overflowed from his body. His expression was indifferent as he stared at Qin Feng and said, Even if you have this spiritual talisman, it's still not enough in front of me. You were just careless before. Qin Feng's gaze gradually turned serious. As expected of one of the three sovereigns, even a spiritual talisman that could kill a spiritual detecting realm expert couldn't kill him. It even left him with a lot of fighting power. He took out a second spiritual talisman and said, What if I add this one? That depends on whether you have the strength to use it or not. Su Tianbu was fearless. His figure flashed and disappeared. The air was constantly fluctuating, and occasionally, a black shadow would flash by. Qin Feng's complexion turned solemn. This guy's speed was simply beyond his imagination. Even if he put down his stone axe, he still wouldn't be able to catch up. Even after being injured to this extent, they're still so powerful. Qin Feng finally saw how terrifying the three little sovereigns were. Mental energy burst out from his mind and filled the surroundings. In front of him, mental energy wrapped around a mental rune and shuttled back and forth. Su Tianbu wanted to attack from time to time, but he was blocked by Qin Feng's spirit sigil. Although he wasn't afraid of the spirit sigil, he didn't dare to face it head-on. The two sides were in a stalemate for a while. Su Tianbu's attack appeared in front of Qin Feng. When Qin Feng's spirit rune struck, he suddenly appeared behind Qin Feng. Go to hell! A cold shout sounded. Su Tianbu suddenly swooped down, and a fierce spiritual force rushed down. However, before he could get close to Qin Feng, a spiritual rune suddenly appeared beside him. It had appeared out of thin air and was not sent out by Qin Feng, so he had no time to react. In front of a spirit master, I can see any of your attacks clearly. Qin Feng suddenly turned around and shouted. When his figure disappeared, the spirit rune exploded. Pucci! Qin Feng retreated quickly, but he still suffered some impact and spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared nervously at the place where the energy was tyrannical. The third spirit rune floated in front of him, ready to strike at any time to give Su Tianbu a fatal blow. He didn't believe that 3 consecutive strikes couldn't take Su Tianbu's life. When the energy gradually dissipated, he was stunned. There were only a few bloodstains on the ground, and Su Tianbu's figure was nowhere to be seen. Not even his bones are left. Qin Feng was surprised, but he quickly shook his head. There was no remnant aura of Su Tianbu nearby. Clearly, he had left. Moreover, he was severely injured, so much so that he didn't even have the strength to fight with him. As expected of a spirit master's attack, Qin Feng exclaimed. This was what he got from Ying Yuan. If it wasn't for the fact that his strength was limited and he couldn't use it, he would have taken some higher-level spirit runes. He originally wanted to take the opportunity to kill Su Tianbu, but after searching for a while, he didn't find anything. The latter ran very decisively and even erased all traces. What a pity! Qin Feng shook his head. The latter must have been severely injured and was worried that he would chase after him. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so careful. Spirit detecting realm. Qin Feng's face was somewhat gloomy. This realm was too powerful. If he could reach this realm, he wouldn't need to fear the experts sent by the imperial capital. However, he also knew that he had only reached the peak of the late stage of bone strengthening for a little more than a year. It was impossible for him to enter the spirit-detecting realm in a short time. Finally, he sorted out his mood and entered the endless forest. Next, he was even more careful. He explored the path with his spirit power and was incomparably cautious. If he encountered an ordinary spirit-detecting realm expert, it would be fine. However, if he encountered someone like Su Tianbu, the danger was too great. Moreover, he only had one last spirit rune left. Suddenly, his body tensed up and his face stiffened. An old man with white hair and beard walked over from afar. He knew this old man. He had appeared in the coronation battle. Moreover, many important figures in the imperial capital were very respectful to him. Qin Feng's face was grave. He lay in the bushes and mobilized part of his spirit power from the purple bowl to wrap around his body. He was worried that he wouldn't be able to hide well with his spirit power alone. Little guy, come out. The old man chuckled as he looked at the direction Qin Feng was hiding and said, very good concealment technique. It actually disappeared. Unfortunately, you used it too late. Qin Feng was shocked. Could it be that the old man had discovered him? However, there was also the possibility of him being tricked. Therefore, he still lay there and didn't move. There is no need to use someone of my status to kill you. Therefore, come out. The old man flicked his finger, and a gust of wind swept towards Qin Feng. Qin Feng quickly dodged, but he soon discovered that this gust of wind was only for show. It disappeared before it even got close. Senior, what is the meaning of this? Qin Feng stopped dodging and looked at the old man as he asked. The Myriad Law Venerable said, my name is the Myriad Law Venerable. I came to find you because I am very interested in your summoning technique. Qin Feng's scalp went numb. He had heard of the Myriad Law Venerable before. He was one of the top experts in the imperial capital. Because he was good at researching various battle techniques, spells, and merit laws, he was called the Myriad Law Venerable by others. Your summoning technique doesn't seem to be simple. The Myriad Law Venerable smiled and looked at Qin Feng. I wonder if little friend can tell me a thing or two? Qin Feng paused. This old man was interested in his Myriad Beast summoning technique. This thing was so powerful that even a giant like him was interested in it. However, just as he was about to speak, an old voice rang out in an ethereal manner. Have you taken a fancy to my spells? However, my technique is not easy to learn. Chapter 240. Chapter 240. The Seventh Prince of Terror. The Myriad Law Venerable One's smile slowly faded as he uttered indifferently. Which friend is it? Come out and meet me. Sai, what's the point of this? Let's go. I don't want to kill too many people. The old voice came from nowhere. The Myriad Law's Venerable One scoffed. Your Excellency, you sure talk big. Not many people in the world have the guts to talk to me like that. You must be some big shot from St. Ryuin. Come out. As the myriad law venerable spoke, he slowly pressed his hand forward. Instantly, a terrifying hand slapped toward Qin Feng. At this moment, Qin Feng felt as if he had been imprisoned. Even moving was extremely difficult. However, he wasn't worried. Since the old man was here, there was no way he would watch him be killed. Just as the giant hand was about to land, it suddenly stopped and then exploded. Qin Feng slowly turned around and looked at the old man behind him. He quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, senior." The old man chuckled at him, then looked at the 10,000 Law Venerable and squinted his turbid eyes. At this moment, the Venerable One had goosebumps all over his body. He was appalled as he exclaimed, "Who are you? How could St. Ryuin possibly have an expert like you?" His reaction gave Qin Feng a fright. This old man from the burial area was so powerful that even the myriad law venerable was shocked. The old man retracted his gaze and muttered to himself, "Young man, don't be too curious. Be careful not to die on this." Looking at the deflated myriad law venerable, Qin Feng almost laughed out loud. He was an old man with half a foot in the coffin, yet he was actually called a young man. This was too funny. However, this also showed that the old man in the burial area had lived for a frightening amount of years. At the very least, it was much longer than the 10,000 Law Venerable. This person is an old man, Qin Feng thought to himself. Even now, he wasn't sure if this old man was good or bad to him. In short, he felt uncomfortable when he was with him. "Thank you for your reminder, senior. Goodbye." The myriad law knight hurriedly bowed and flew away without looking back. "Senior, he's from the imperial capital. Why didn't you kill him?" Qin Feng asked. The old man smiled and said, and then, Qin Feng didn't understand. Did the higher-ups of the St. Ruin need to consider the consequences before killing the experts of the imperial capital? The old man shook his head and did not say much. He only said something that Qin Feng did not understand. Everyone has a reason for their existence. Too much is not beneficial, and too little is not harmful. Qin Feng scratched his head, unable to understand. He said, "Senior, please take me back to St. Ruin." Hee. The old man shook his head and smiled. "You have your own path, and others can't interfere. This is your calamity, and it's destined that you can't avoid it." Qin Feng grinned. From the sound of it, he didn't care anymore and was just going to leave him here. What calamity? Can't you just bring me back and avoid it? Little guy, your path has only just begun. You still have a lot to face in the future. Cherish this training. When the old man's voice was heard, he had already disappeared. "Hey, senior, will you help me in secret? What if I meet the old guy from the imperial capital again? You have to protect me." Qin Feng shouted. Hee, I can't protect you. The only one who can protect you is yourself. Whether you can survive or not will depend on your own ability. What's going on? Qin Feng was speechless. This old man was too ignorant of the big picture. Just showing up and scaring away the myriad law knight was enough. As for whether the old man was secretly protecting him, Qin Feng had no idea. However, in his heart, he had already taken off this protective shield. The old man was right. He couldn't pin his hopes on others. Whether he could return to St. Ruin alive, he could only rely on himself. The setting sun was like blood, rendering the western sky magnificent as if it was dyed in blood. Qin Feng sat cross-legged on a huge rock, breathing and expelling. He circulated the 100 calamity heaven devouring technique, and his complexion gradually returned to normal. Some of the bruises caused by the myriad law knight's big hand also recovered. When he exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, his complexion was completely restored to its peak. I really didn't expect you to be able to hold on until now. However, just as Qin Feng was about to get up and leave, a faint laughter suddenly came from not far away. Qin Feng turned his head and saw a figure in a golden robe. "Seventh Prince, Xianyuan Mao. You're alone?" Qin Feng stared at him cautiously. "Don't look. I'm indeed alone." The seventh prince saw through Qin Feng's intentions. He smiled faintly and said, "Are you surprised that I dare to come here alone? You were able to break through the ambush of several teams, and even Su Tianbu suffered a loss in your hands. Although you had external help, I can't deny that you're indeed very interesting. The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng and said with a smile, but you don't know that as a prince of the spirit detecting realm, Su Tianbu can't compare to me. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely tyrannical wave of spiritual power slowly spread out from his body. Qin Feng was shocked. The seventh prince had also reached the spirit detecting realm. Didn't the ninth princess say that he was on par with the 8 heavenly kings? At this time, he suddenly remembered the fourth prince Xianyuan Owl's evaluation of the seventh prince's strength. It was ambiguous. No wonder he was so vague at that time. It turned out that the seventh prince had already reached this realm at that time. The terrifying wave of power that spread out from the seventh prince's body was not inferior to Su Tianbu's. If you want to fight me with spiritual seals, I don't mind. With that, the seventh prince flicked his finger and 2 spiritual seals appeared. He shook his head and smiled. Compared to collecting, I believe that I definitely have more things in my Chinquan bag than you. Qin Feng's face was gloomy. The strength of the spirit detecting realm could crush him, and he did not have as many treasures as the other party. How could he fight this battle? They were not on the same level at all. Compared to his seriousness, the seventh prince, Xianyuan Mao, was much calmer and had a faint smile on his face. I know that you have some things on you. If you could take the initiative to hand them over to me, perhaps I will give you a quick death. In other words, I'm going to die no matter what. Qin Feng said coldly. Yes, you can say that. The seventh prince nodded slightly and said with a smile, but you should know that sometimes living is more painful than dying. Believe me, don't be stubborn. Otherwise, you will definitely regret not choosing a quick death. His voice was very soft and carried a smile, but his tone was extremely cold, as if he was talking about a very ordinary thing. This attitude was cold and cruel. Qin Feng stared at him in silence. It seems that you still don't believe me. Seeing this, the seventh prince smiled and shook his head, but as soon as his voice fell, his body immediately floated. Whoosh! A strong wind sound came from the sky, and a golden lightning bolt shot toward Qin Feng as fast as thunder. In the blink of an eye, the seventh prince appeared in front of Qin Feng, and a fist that was suffused with golden light blasted toward him. Whoosh! Under the golden fist, the air was directly squeezed and exploded, producing bursts of explosive sounds. The seventh prince's seemingly simple punch condensed an extremely powerful force. Qin Feng took a deep breath, and the mental power and spiritual power in the spiritual coffin surged. He clenched his 5 fingers, and a crystal light flickered. Chapter 241. Total Suppression Bang. A dull sound rang out. In an instant, a gust of wind blew and golden light burst out. In the explosion of light, a figure was pushed back. Qin Feng was pushed back dozens of steps before he stabilized himself. His face became even more solemn at this moment. Blood dripped from his clenched fist, which was trembling slightly. He was injured from the first exchange of blows. Qin Feng's face was very solemn. This was the strongest opponent he had ever encountered among his peers. Not bad. Your arm wasn't crippled after taking a blow from me, although I held back. The seventh prince smiled and attacked again. Qin Feng only saw a blur before the seventh prince's figure appeared on his left like a ghost. An extremely tyrannical force quickly attacked. Qin Feng turned around and put his arms in front of his chest. Bang! The seventh prince's golden fist hit Qin Feng's arms. As the muffled sound rang out, Qin Feng retreated explosively once again. The burning pain on his arm caused him to furrow his brows tightly. The seventh prince didn't use his full strength at all. Even so, he couldn't fight back. The gap between them was too big. Although it was a bit of a blow, Qin Feng couldn't deny that the imperial princes were indeed very strong. They were stronger than the 8 heavenly kings and the disciples of the heavenly palace. This wasn't a difference in realm, but a difference in combat strength among those of the same realm. The seventh prince suppressed his strength to the complete bone, strengthening realm. He only had a little more spirit detecting realm comprehension, but he couldn't fight back. This showed how terrifying the Imperial Prince's combat strength was. He finally understood why the Imperial Princes didn't participate in the Heavenly King Challenge or the Sovereign Challenge. It was because once they fought, no one else could compete. The current you, will you continue to be so stubborn? The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with interest as he smiled. What I said earlier still counts. Let's talk about it again when you beat me down. Haha, you're really a tough nut to crack. Fine, I'll break your bones today. A gust of wind blew and golden light spread. Qin Feng's body flickered with crystalline light as he used the power of the spiritual outer coffin to engage in a fierce battle. The two of them fought very fiercely. It was a completely head-on fight without any fancy moves. On the ground, gravel continued to explode. Even huge rocks weighing several hundred kilograms were shattered by the shock waves from the exchange of blows between the two. Giant trees were broken, and sand and pebbles were sent flying. The two of them moved quickly. In just a few minutes, they had already exchanged dozens of blows. However, Qin Feng was clearly at a disadvantage. He was constantly pushed back, and the web between his thumb and forefinger was split open. Dragon Tiger Strangle. Qin Feng used the 10,000 Beast summoning technique. His left hand formed a tiger shadow, and the tiger's roar shook the forest. Executing the divine dragon art, an azure dragon appeared in his right hand, and the dragon's roar intimidated all beasts. The dragon came from the clouds, and the tiger came from the wind. The dragon and tiger surged as they attacked in a spiral. Seeing this, the seventh prince nodded slightly. He formed a seal with one hand, and a yellow bell appeared and enveloped him. Boom! The dragon and tiger charged forward. As they spun at high speed, they were even more powerful. They slammed heavily into the earthen yellow bell. Wong! There seemed to be a crisp sound of a bell ringing, and ripples appeared on the bell. However, what made Qin Feng's face fall was that his strongest attack could not break through his opponent's defense. Now it's my turn to attack. As the dragon and tiger disappeared, the bell around the seventh prince dissipated as well. He looked at Qin Feng mockingly. Then, he formed a seal with both hands, and the spiritual energy between heaven and earth started to gather rapidly. His body moved without wind, and he slowly rose into the air. Quasi-heaven technique, golden light finger. When the energy gathered to a certain extent, the seventh prince suddenly pointed his finger, and golden light shone from his fingertip. A golden beam of light shot out from his fingertip, leaving a faint golden trace in the air. Qin Feng took a deep breath and formed a seal quickly. With a soft shout, a huge tortoise shadow appeared above him. Boom! The golden beam of light poured down like a torrent, heavily bombarding the tortoise shadow. The tortoise shadow shook violently, and the golden light flowed like lava. Crack! The ground under Qin Feng's feet cracked rapidly, and then it exploded. Rocks and soil shot out, and a huge pit was formed. The seventh prince looked at his masterpiece and nodded slightly. It can still take it? Looking at the deep pit filled with golden light, his eyes flickered slightly. The huge pit was laid horizontally, and the golden light was rampant. The aftermath turned into a golden shockwave, and wherever it spread, the earth and rocks were all shattered. The ground within a radius of 10 meters looked as if it had been plowed, and it was a mess. As the golden light gradually disappeared, the scene inside was exposed to the seventh prince's eyes. Its bones are indeed tough. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he said. His gaze landed on the huge pit, and the first thing he saw was the increasingly faint tortoise shadow, which was covered in cracks. Below it was Qin Feng, but his face was slightly pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that blocking this destructive attack had consumed a lot of his energy. With trembling hands, Qin Feng looked at the tortoise shadow that was gradually disappearing, and his eyes were slightly obscure. In the end, his strength was still too weak. From the beginning of the battle, he was at a disadvantage, and every time after that, he was suppressed and had no chance to fight back. The seventh prince floated down lightly, looked at Qin Feng, and said, "If this is the basis of your arrogance, then today I will completely destroy it." As he spoke, golden light rippled in his palm, releasing a tyrannical spiritual energy fluctuation. Qin Feng stared at him and suddenly waved his hand, and the last golden talisman flew out. The seventh prince's face changed, and he quickly retreated. At the same time, a black stone shot out from his body and hit the talisman. Boom! In an instant, the two exploded and the runes intertwined, and the spiritual energy went berserk, devouring and resisting each other. An incomparably tyrannical shockwave spread from the center. The two retreated at the same time, leaving the explosion area. In the end, the two forces dissipated at the same time. Spirit talisman, haha, if you like, let's play with this. But do you have any more? The seventh prince smiled, but his smile was cold. He flicked his finger, and another black stone shot out. At this moment, Qin Feng's pupils contracted, and his hair stood on end. He could clearly sense the terrifying power contained within the thumb-sized pebble. This kind of spirit talisman was not weaker than his. Qin Feng quickly retreated and used the dragon swimming body to increase his speed to the extreme. Boom! The black stone exploded 50 meters away from him. Pucci! Although Qin Feng tried his best to dodge, he was still hit by the impact, and his body flew horizontally, suffering a serious injury. What? You don't have any more spirit talismans on you? The seventh prince played with the black stone in his hand and looked at Qin Feng mockingly. Then he put away the black stone and laughed. I also don't want to use this method to deal with you. Qin Feng's face was gloomy. In terms of collecting all kinds of rare treasures, who could compare to the imperial family? His 3 spirit talismans might be a great thing for ordinary forces, but in the eyes of the imperial family, it was nothing. Not to mention that he had used 2 to deal with Su Tianbu. Even if he had not used one, he could not afford it. Chapter 242. A sudden helping hand. Qin Feng turned around and ran. If he continued to fight while being completely suppressed, his life would be in danger. A pair of light wings appeared on his back, bringing with it a gust of wind as he flew into the sky. Hee, do you think you can run away? Looking at Qin Feng, who was rapidly flying away, the seventh prince was not in a hurry. He waved his arm, and with a flash of light, a cassock with golden stripes appeared. The cassock flickered with a red light as it floated in the air. The seventh prince jumped on the cassock and poured his spiritual energy into it. The cassock emitted a red light and flew away quickly. After flying for some distance, Qin Feng did not even have time to breathe a sigh of relief before his expression changed again. He suddenly turned his head, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He saw the seventh prince standing on the cassock, speeding over and looking at him with a mocking expression. One relied on light wings to fly for a short period of time, while the other relied on a flying treasure. Their speed and endurance were not on the same level at all. Boom! The seventh prince caught up and punched out. Golden spiritual energy swept down like a flood. Qin Feng turned around, gathered all his strength, and punched the flood of spiritual energy. When the flood of spiritual energy was scattered, his light wings could not be maintained. His body staggered a few times in the air before finally tumbling and falling. After landing, Qin Feng did not stop. He slipped into the dense forest, and the spiritual energy in the purple bowl quickly enveloped him. His flying speed was obviously not as fast as the seventh prince. In the air, he could only become a live target. The only way was to stay in the forest, where there were many obstacles that could block him. The seventh prince wildly attacked in the air, and large areas of the mountain exploded. Giant trees were torn apart, and mountain rocks were shattered. Everywhere he passed, there was a scene of devastation. Qin Feng ran all the way to the west of the imperial capital. There was a large swamp there, shrouded in fog, all year round. It was extremely dangerous inside. This was the second life-forbidden area in the primitive land, the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp. Its degree of danger was not inferior to the Nine Spirit Mountain Range. The seventh prince was very strong in all aspects and suppressed him in all aspects. He could not win or escape. He could only take the risk to enter the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp, hoping to force the seventh prince to retreat. After half an hour of fleeing, Qin Feng gradually approached the Heavenly Forest Deserting Swamp. In front of them was a barren land. The air was humid, and the ground had become much softer. The seventh prince also discovered Qin Feng's intention. His face immediately darkened, and his attacks became fiercer. Obviously, he was also afraid of the Heavenly Forest Deserting Swamp. He wanted to capture Qin Feng before they arrived at the swamp. He didn't want anything unexpected to happen. Hope was right in front of him. Qin Feng's spirit was lifted. He summoned his light wings again and flew toward the Heavenly Forest Dead Swamp at lightning speed. Facing the seventh prince's increasingly fierce attacks, he mostly adopted a dodging posture. If he really couldn't dodge, he could only take it head-on. In the distance, marsh gas rose and shrouded the area in dense fog. Rumble. Suddenly, an even more powerful aura appeared. The seventh prince blocked in front of Qin Feng. At this moment, he used his full strength to prevent Qin Feng from rushing in. And upon seeing this scene, Qin Feng's expression turned extremely gloomy. The Heavenly Forest Deserting Swamp was right before his eyes, but at this distance, it was the difference between life and death. He knew that it was almost impossible for him to barge through. The seventh prince wouldn't give him a chance either. Qin Feng's eyes flickered as he thought of a plan. However, all the ideas in his mind were eliminated. If the seventh prince didn't hold back, he would have no chance of winning. He clenched his fists tightly, and a sense of helplessness rose in his heart. A bitter expression appeared on his face. The difference in strength was too big, and he couldn't make up for it no matter what he did. I almost let you escape. The seventh prince stared coldly at Qin Feng. He threw out a palm, and a vigorous spiritual energy roared. It turned into a golden dragon and whizzed towards Qin Feng. Qin Feng circulated his spiritual energy, and the mental energy in his mind also burst out. It collided with the seventh prince's spiritual energy golden dragon, and in an instant, a spiritual energy storm rose. Poochie! Qin Feng staggered back, and blood spurted out from the corner of his mouth. He stretched out his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and a ferocious look appeared on his face. Since this is the case, I can only fight to the death. Even if I die today, I will peel off a layer of your skin. The seventh prince smiled in disdain at Qin Feng's words. He formed a seal with his hands, and golden light surged around his body. The metal energy between the heavens and the earth also rapidly gathered. Qin Feng also formed a seal with his hands. At this point, there was no need for him to hold back. Metal God technique. The seventh prince shouted, and endless golden light shrouded him. The metal energy in front of him was like a cluster of golden flames, and it was filled with a heart-palpitating power. Suddenly, the seventh prince's eyes narrowed, and he stared at Qin Feng. To be precise, he stared at his hands that were forming seals. This kind of seal. He squinted his eyes, and his gaze was almost engraved on Qin Feng's hands. Every change in the seal affected every nerve in his heart. Whoosh, whoosh. The metal energy in the sky wandered over, making a rustling sound. On the other side, the fire was burning, and it was as if it was going to burn the sky. Fire God technique, water God technique. When he saw the endless metal energy of water and metal energy, the seventh prince's pupils shrank, and he shouted almost subconsciously, Qin Feng, hand over the 5 elements technique, and I can guarantee on my reputation as a prince that I will spare your life. Your reputation is worthless in front of me. Qin Feng coldly snorted as he pushed his palms forward. The metal energy of water and metal energy turned into 2 giant pythons, and each of them carried a terrifying power as they rushed forward. Sizzle. Water and metal energy were originally incompatible, and at this moment, Qin Feng forcefully stuck them together, and suddenly a large amount of white smoke rose. "You're courting death." The seventh prince shouted angrily, and the metal energy vibrated out, turning into a giant golden python, and fiercely collided with the metal energy of water and metal energy. In an instant, the metal energy, and metal energy exploded at the same time. The three giant pythons were entangled together, biting, resisting, and devouring each other, causing a strong wind to blow and sand to fly. Bang! When the energy gradually dissipated, the seventh prince suddenly flew out, and his golden hand grabbed at Qin Feng. Roar! The tiger roar shook the forest, and Qin Feng had already prepared the fierce tiger array. The fierce tiger was used for killing, and its combat power was unparalleled. At the same time, a giant turtle shell appeared above, resisting the seventh prince's attack. "Wait until I catch you, and I'll personally check your mind." The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with a fiery gaze, and then smiled coldly. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed at the fierce tiger array. Boom! Boom! However, at this moment, a red light suddenly appeared and blasted at the seventh prince's back. Wherever it passed, even the space was left with a faint red mark. A heart-palpitating fluctuation burst out from the red light. On the other side, a long spear appeared, and it came horizontally. White smoke rose around it, and it could not be seen clearly. However, at the tip of the spear, the space was distorted, and the air was constantly exploding. A terrifying fluctuation of spiritual energy rippled out. Two figures appeared at the same time. One was covered in red light, and the other was covered in white light. Both of them could not be seen clearly, but the aura that burst out at this moment was shocking. God's slaying arrow, Sky's slaughtering spear. The seventh prince's face suddenly changed, and the spiritual energy around him exploded. He suddenly opened his hands and shouted, "Emperor's bell! Roar!" At the same time, the fierce tiger roared, and with the might of 100 beasts, it roared out. Chapter 243. The strongest trio. No one had expected that all four of them would be momentarily stunned. Qin Feng did not expect that two helpers would appear at this most critical moment. Moreover, both of them were extremely powerful. Most importantly, he did not notice them at all, and they suddenly attacked. The seventh prince hadn't expected that when he was about to use all of his power to catch Qin Feng, someone would launch a sneak attack from behind. Moreover, there were two of them at once. From the strength of the attack, it didn't seem like they had reached the spirit-detecting realm, but the power contained in the attack caused all the pores on his body to shrink. Similarly, the two people who launched the surprise attack also paused for a moment. Clearly, they did not expect that there would actually be someone who had the same goal as them, which was to kill the seventh prince. They had been following him in secret all this while, intending to make a move at the most crucial moment. However, they didn't expect that there would be someone else, and they didn't notice the other party at all. God slaying arrow, Sky slaughtering spear, Heaven Emperor bell, Heaven devouring finger. This pause only lasted for a moment. Soon after, the four of them reacted, and each of them unleashed an extremely powerful attack. Rumble. This place was boiling with energy explosions. Ferocious shock waves spread out one after another, causing the energy of heaven and earth to go berserk. It was as if the heavens were collapsing and the earth was splitting apart. The air continued to explode and escape. The space was distorted to the extreme, forming a vacuum zone. Wong. A terrifying shockwave erupted from the center of the explosion, and Qin Feng and the other two were sent flying. As the energy gradually dissipated, a broken bell slowly appeared in front of the three of them. At this moment, the seventh prince cut a sorry figure. There were many scratches on the big bell, and there were even a few holes that were emitting astonishing energy fluctuations. Bloody holes had appeared on his shoulders and right arm, and fresh blood was gushing out from them. His eyes were overcast, and there was a bit of shock on his face. Who was he? He had received the best nurturing since he was young, and his bones were the most powerful. He could completely dominate others at the same level. However, at this moment, he was injured while defending with all his strength. Moreover, his opponents were actually 3 people who hadn't stepped into this realm yet. This made him feel humiliated, and at the same time, a cold, killing intent was born. In the past, it had always been the princes who fought against their superiors. No one would ever go against them. But today, this rule had been broken by him. It's him, Qin Feng's eyes, and Qin Feng's Heaven Emperor bells, Heaven Emperor bells, Heaven Emperor bell, Heaven Emperor bell, Heavens, Heaven Emperor bell. Jing Wui, the nouveau riche who wore golden gongs and satin and always liked to look around lecherously, no longer had his wretched aura. His whole body emitted a fierce aura, like an unsheathed sword, bringing with it an incomparably sharp feeling. The other person was dressed in black, and his age was about the same as theirs. His face was as sharp as a knife, emitting a chilly aura. His eyes were pitch black and deep, and his gaze was reserved. He held a long spear in his hand, causing him to look like a god of war, emitting an extremely fierce battle intent. Who? Heaven who? Qin Feng secretly focused. He knew Jing Wui and had some understanding of him. He said that he wanted to shoot down the sun, and now it seemed that he was shooting down the scorching sun of the imperial capital. However, he did not recognize the black-clothed young man at all. Since he had attacked the 7th prince, it was obvious that he was not from the imperial capital, nor was he from the Saint Ruin. In that case, he could only be someone from another part of the primitive land. They were about the same age as him, but they didn't have the support of the Saint Ruin like him. Yet they were able to reach this level. It was clear that these two were very powerful. Both of them were half a step into the spirit channeling realm. If they could injure the 7th prince, it was clear that they were not ordinary half a step into the spirit channeling realm. As for their origins, Qin Feng didn't have time to think too much about it. In short, they just needed to follow him. The 7th prince coldly swept his gaze over the 3 of them. He slowly withdrew his spirit force, and a cruel smile appeared on his face. Good, very good. To be able to produce such young experts under the imperial capital suppression, this is our mistake. However, it's time to end this mistake. At the same time, his heart was slightly shaken. To be able to injure him with just half a step into the spirit channeling realm, this kind of talent was definitely not something an ordinary person could possess. Moreover, from his point of view, these 2 people were even more of a threat than Qin Feng. The students of the Saint Ruin could not be too strong. After all, they had a strong foundation. However, these 2 had nothing and had relied on themselves to reach this level. If these kinds of people were not killed, they would definitely become a disaster in the future. At this moment, the 7th prince's heart was filled with killing intent. Killing you? I also have the same intention, the black-clothed young man said. His tone was very calm, without any fluctuations. Hee, today I will truly shoot down the sun. Jing Wui let out a cold snort as the blood-red spirit force around him trembled. He looked at Qin Feng, then at the young man, and laughed. It seems like I'm not the only one on the path to shooting down the sun. There are others with me. Boom! Qin Feng used the divine emperor's aura, and his aura instantly entered half a step into the spirit channeling realm. The roars of dragons and tigers continued to come from his body. The tiger formation above him trembled. Kill! There was nothing much to say. At this point, there was only one word to say: battle. Only by killing the other party or being killed by the other party would this battle end. The 7th prince also understood this point. His spirit force swept out without holding back and turned into a golden wave that crazily swept the 3 of them in. Within the golden wave, there were 3 powerful auras that erupted. The black-clothed young man's body erupted with a white light that looked like flames. Jing Wui was surrounded by the color of blood. It was like a sea of blood. As it churned, a strong smell of blood spread out. black spirit force surged around Qin Feng. Sometimes it turned into a tiger, sometimes it turned into a dragon as it crazily attacked. The battle between the four of them instantly entered a state of incandescence. Extremely fierce spirit force fluctuations constantly spread out from the battle between the four of them. Everywhere it passed, rocks would shatter and the earth would crack. Qin Feng had used the Divine Emperor's aura to enter half a step into the spirit channeling realm. With the help of the other two, he could directly face off against the Seventh Prince. He even had the upper hand. The Seventh Prince's expression was dark as he continued to exchange blows with the three of them. His heart trembled. The three of them were too powerful, and even he felt numb from the shock waves. If it wasn't for his body being tempered, he would have already lost. With a whoosh, he took out a black stone and threw it at the black-clothed young man. Careful! Qin Feng's expression changed. He didn't expect the Seventh Prince to use a spirit seal at this time. The black-clothed young man's expression also changed. He quickly retreated and took out a stone bead and threw it over. Boom! A terrifying shockwave erupted and the four of them were sent flying. You actually also have a spirit seal? The Seventh Prince revealed a shocked expression. This person wasn't in St. Ryuin, nor was he in the capital. How could he have a spirit seal of this level? This kind of spirit seal required at least a heaven-ranked spirit master to refine, and it was impossible for there to be such a spirit master in the outside world. Since you like to play this game, I'll play with you. Jing Wui sneered. Chapter 244. The Fall of the Prince. Even Qin Feng was shocked. Where did these two guys come from? When he was at St. Ryuin, he had only taken out 3 spiritual seals of this level. But from the looks of it, these two seemed to have a lot of them. Jing Wui waved his hand, and the same stone bead appeared, bursting forth with powerful spiritual energy. The Seventh Prince hurriedly took out a black stone and threw it over, causing a huge explosion. Haha, it seems that this friend has also visited the Jin clan. Jing Wui laughed heartily. Was this stolen from the Jin clan? Qin Feng stared blankly for a moment, then immediately sighed inwardly at the courage of these two people. They actually dared to steal from the Jin clan, and this kind of spiritual seal at that. He didn't know what to say. The Seventh Prince's hanging hands trembled slightly. He was angry. The other party was obviously mocking him on purpose. So what if the imperial capital was high and mighty? Didn't they come and go as they pleased? He put away the spiritual talisman in his hand. He no longer had the upper hand in the battle of treasures. Although he still had a lot of spiritual talismans in his Chinquan bag, he didn't know how many these two people had stolen, so he didn't dare to use them casually. Looks like I'll still have to rely on my own strength, he muttered. With a flip of his palm, golden light flickered, and a purple-gold broadsword appeared in his hand. This saber was 3 feet long, and the blade was as wide as a palm. The hilt was made of pure gold, and the tip of the saber was inlaid with a round golden beast core. The blade was not sharp. On the contrary, it was very rough. However, there were many brands on the blade. Those brands were faintly purple in color. Purple light flickered, making the saber look even more extraordinary. The blade was thick and blunt, but it exuded an incomparably sharp aura. Dragon-slaying god-slaying saber. Looking at the Seventh Prince's treasured saber that was emitting a purple light, Qin Feng's expression became extremely grave. As for the dragon-slaying god-slaying saber, there was no one who did not know about it. It was extremely baleful and powerful. It was said that thousands of years ago, this saber had slaughtered a dragon and was stained with dragon blood. The most frightening thing about this saber was not its tyrannical power, but its murderous aura that could invade one's mind. Especially for a spirit master, it was simply a destructive weapon. For thousands of years, this saber had killed countless powerful spirit beasts and human powerhouses. It had been stained with the blood of too many powerhouses. As a result, the saber's murderous aura was extremely heavy, causing great harm to one's spiritual power. What a spirit master was most proud of was their extraordinary spiritual power. Once it was eroded, it would be a terrible disaster. Qin Feng stared at the Seventh Prince with a solemn expression. The power in his body was circulating rapidly, and he was ready to deal with it at any time. You should be proud that you made me use this blade. The seventh prince smiled sinisterly at Qin Feng. Then he slowly raised the dragon, slaying saber, and slashed down at him. Suddenly, the black chi surged like a demonic fog. It carried a terrifying, murderous aura as it whizzed towards Qin Feng. The 100 calamity heaven devouring incantation circulated quickly, and the devouring power erupted. At the same time, he used the 10,000 beast summoning technique. All kinds of beast phantoms roared and charged at the black gas, causing it to shake violently. Boom! All of a sudden, Qin Feng's expression changed. An invisible force covered his face, and he was unable to block it. Buzz! Buzz! That force invaded his mind and tore at his spiritual power. Qin Feng's body shook, and his body slowed down. His spiritual power was eroded by the murderous aura, and his eyes instantly turned scarlet. His face was ferocious, and he kept growling. He felt that his control over his spiritual power was getting weaker, and he could clearly feel that his pure spiritual power was being contaminated. When the seventh prince saw this, a cold smile appeared on his face. He did not know how long it took him to get the dragon-slaying, god-slaying saber from his father. Fortunately, the power that it had unleashed was satisfactory. Boom! At the critical moment, the white spear radiance attacked and shrouded Qin Feng. At the same time, a pure force spread throughout his body, causing him to become more irritable. His mind gradually calmed down. Supreme purification, the young man in the sturdy robe shouted. The white radiance surged and vibrated with strands of holy light. With a strange power, it purified all the murderous aura that had entered Qin Feng's mind. Thank you. Qin Feng calmed down and smiled at the young man in the sturdy robe. The young man did not say anything. He turned and charged at the seventh prince. His long spear vibrated, and rays of spear radiance tore through the air, launching a powerful attack. I can't fall behind either. Qin Feng also charged forward. He did not dare to use his spiritual power anymore. He hid in the spiritual coffin. Just like how a spiritual power master countered spiritual beasts, the dragon-slaying, god-slaying saber countered a spiritual power master. He took out his stone axe and joined the battle. The four of them were furious, and their killing intent was overflowing. With the dragon-slaying, god-slaying saber, the seventh prince's combat strength increased greatly. Every ray of sword radiance carried a terrifying, murderous aura. However, Qin Feng and the other two were also fighting with all their might. Spiritual power gushed out from their bodies, and the whole place was boiling. The overflowing energy left shocking marks on the ground. In the end, all four of them were injured. Blood purgatory slash. Suddenly, Jing Wui took out a butcher's knife and approached the seventh prince abruptly. He waved the butcher's knife, and a scarlet ray of light shot out and smashed into the seventh prince's back. His attack was too sudden. Previously, his spiritual power had decreased too quickly, and everyone thought that he was seriously injured. They did not expect that he was secretly preparing a big move. Overlord Spear. At the same time, the sturdy robed young man stabbed out with his spear. A ray of spear radiance shot out and hit the seventh prince's dragon-slaying, god-slaying saber, sending it flying. Qin Feng, quick! The young man shouted. Roar! Qin Feng used his left hand to capture the dragon and his right hand to hold the tiger. The dragon and tiger surged out. At the same time, his spiritual power formed the fierce tiger array and roared out. Whoosh! 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 Almost at the same time, the power of water and fire spread out and attacked the seventh prince's body. Pucci! The seventh prince suffered a heavy blow. Even if he hurriedly used the Emperor Bell, it was not enough. He was sent flying by Qin Feng. Heaven-devouring finger. When he was sent flying, Qin Feng, Jing Wui, and the young man did not dare to stay idle. They wanted to take his life while he was weak. This was the best time to kill the seventh prince. The three of them were not easy to deal with. They knew that it was not easy to create this opportunity. Almost at the same time, They used all of their spiritual power to release their strongest attacks. Rumble. The three terrifying attacks landed on the seventh prince's body. Even if he was at his peak, he could barely take on such an attack. At this moment, he suffered a heavy blow, and the spiritual power around his body withered. "It's over, seventh prince." A cold and emotionless voice suddenly sounded out, and the seventh prince immediately shuddered. Just as he was about to retreat, his body suddenly stopped. His body had been locked on by someone. At the same time, Qin Feng held the stone axe. Jing Wui raised the pig slaughtering knife, and the sturdy rogue young man held the long spear. They either chopped or stabbed, and all of them landed on the seventh prince's body. This was the killing blow of the three of them. "Even if I die, I will not let you have it easy. Just you wait. You will be chased by the imperial capital endlessly." The seventh prince stared at Qin Feng with hatred. He knew that he was done for. He did not even have the chance to escape. Before his life force disappeared, he lightly pointed his finger, and a beam of light shot into the dragon, God-slaying knife. Boom! His body suddenly collapsed, and his aura disappeared. Chapter 245. The sun-shooting trio. The moment the seventh prince's body fell, the dragon-slaying, God-slaying blade vibrated, and a purple-gold light engulfed the seventh prince's body. This scene was so sudden that Qin Feng and the other two did not react in time. Of course, even if they did, they would not chase after the seventh prince. This was the dragon-slaying, God-slaying blade's instinct to protect its owner. This kind of killing weapon had been stained with the blood of too many strong warriors. If the seventh prince was able to use its power, the three of them would be dead now. It's a pity that he lost all his treasures. Jing Wui grimaced in pain. At this moment, he had returned to his usual wretched self, feeling extremely regretful. Qin Feng also had the same thought. He had no idea how many treasures the seventh prince had, but it was definitely enough to shock them. Not to mention the other treasures, just the unknown number of spiritual seals and the flying treasure were enough to make people jealous. However, this regret only lasted for a moment and then disappeared. Even if he left it behind, he might not dare to take it. The Jin clan's bronze mirror had almost exposed him. Who knew if the seventh prince had such a thing on him? If this news reached the ears of the imperial capital's emperor, then it would be terrible. Many thanks to the two of you this time around. Qin Feng smiled as he stared at the two of them. "Ha, brother, you're too polite. I'm not helping you." Jing Wui looked up and smiled. "As the descendant of Ho-Yi, shooting the sun is my duty. But this friend, you look very unfamiliar. I don't know where you come from." Jing Wui looked at the well-dressed young man with a smile. His peach blossom eyes were extremely charming. Qin Feng also looked at him. He wanted to know where such an outstanding person came from and what kind of background he had. Tan Xian of the Tan family. The well-dressed young man smiled faintly. "Tan Xian, you're Tan Xian?" Ha. As expected, I should have guessed. Only you." Jing Wui was stunned for a moment, then he laughed. Qin Feng was slightly puzzled. "Brother, you don't know that this Tan Xian was an extraordinary figure in the imperial city a few years ago. He was the only person who could compete with the princes of the imperial family at a young age. He was known as the #1 genius in the imperial city, but the Tan family hid it very well. Most people don't know what Tan Xian looks like." Seeing that Qin Feng was puzzled, Jing Wui said with a smile, "If the Tan clan hadn't been exterminated by the imperial clan, the three young supremes would have been obedient grandsons in front of him." Hearing this, Qin Feng was shocked. This Tan Xian actually had such a big history. Was he originally from the imperial capital? Tan Xian's achievements would have been immeasurable if the Tan family hadn't been wiped out and their entire clan had been wiped out. What a pity. Jing Wui shook his head slightly and sighed. "It was rumored that you were already dead. I didn't expect you to still be alive." His gaze was somewhat complicated as he said, "We didn't find your corpse back then, so we guessed this. I didn't expect you to still be alive. However, your current actions are considered a complete betrayal of the imperial capital." The ancestors of the Tan clan were originally slaves. There's no such thing as betrayal. Tan Xian's voice was penetrating to the bone. His gaze vaguely glanced at Jing Wui. He was silent for a moment. Then he said in a soft voice, "I saw that your moves were inclined to the dark side. Moreover, they were decisive and ruthless. Your figure was erratic, and your attacks caught people off guard. If I'm not wrong, you should be a member of an assassin's organization." Qin Feng looked at Jing Wui with great interest. He was full of curiosity about this person who always disguised himself as a pervert. Now that he was involved, Jing Wui didn't hide it anymore. He shrugged and said in a relaxed tone, "You have sharp eyes. I am indeed a member of an assassin's organization." Assassins' organizations are usually hidden in the dark. Very few people can see the true face of this organization. Moreover, this organization usually doesn't participate in the struggles of various clans and powers. They only accept missions. As long as the reward is enough, they dare to act against anyone. I'm very curious. Who is it, and how much reward can they offer for you to act against a prince of the imperial family? Tan Xian said with a smile that wasn't a smile. No one can afford this. Shaking his head, Jing Wui said, "In our line of work, there's a rule. That is, the target's own strength or the power behind him must be within the scope of the assassin's organization. Once this limit is exceeded, no matter how much reward is offered, it won't be accepted. What do you think of the imperial family's weight?" Tan Xian smiled slightly. If the target is the imperial family, no one can afford such a reward. The assassin's organization definitely won't accept this mission. If that's the case, why did you act against the imperial family? Qin Feng thought for a while and speculated, could it be that this assassin's organization was also destroyed by the imperial family? No, I've been hiding here for the past few years. I've never heard of it. Tan Xian shook his head. Although you're here, what you see is just a performance. The assassin's organization hasn't been destroyed, but it's only in name. Jing Wui's lowered eyes flashed with a touch of darkness. My master, 3 martial uncles, and the top 10 assassins in the organization are all dead. The assassin's organization has now become a puppet of the imperial family. What? Tan Xian was shocked. Qin Feng wasn't from the imperial capital, so he didn't understand the power structure here. However, he was different. His ancestors had long gotten rid of their slave status because of their great contributions. They lived in the imperial capital and founded the Tan's Gate. He had always lived in the imperial capital, so he had some understanding of this unusually mysterious organization. The Assassin's organization had existed for many years. If one traced back to its origin, it was probably even older than the Tan's Gate and the Jin clan. Moreover, they were very mysterious. No one had seen the true face of this organization since ancient times, nor did they know the scale of this organization. Even though there were many similar assassins organizations later on, they couldn't be compared to this organization. However, such a huge change had happened to this organization. It seems that the imperial family has made a move against the assassins organization. They never participate in the struggles of other forces, but they've made a move against you. I'm afraid they have some ulterior motives. Tan Xian whispered. The Tan's destruction may not be as simple as it seems on the surface. Jing Wui said, not long after your Tan's destruction, the Assassin's organization encountered an unforeseen event. This can't be a coincidence. Tan Xian nodded, his dark eyes flashing. First the Tan's Gate, then the Assassin's organization. The Imperial family was about to make a big move. No wonder you hate the Imperial family so much. Tan Xian sighed softly. This Jing Wui's experience was somewhat similar to his. Aren't you the same? Jing Wui shook his head and smiled. You refuse to leave. Aren't you looking for an opportunity to take revenge? In this regard, Tan Xian said calmly, the hatred of the extermination of my clan is irreconcilable. Ha ha! You and I are the same. You killed my sister and destroyed my master. In this life, I'll spend my life with the Imperial family. Jing Wui smiled vulgarly. He was carefree, but anyone could hear the cold, killing intent in his words. Tan Xian nodded. Under his calm eyes, there was a crazy hatred surging. Just like you. I'll spend my life with the Imperial family. As long as I'm alive, they'll never have peace. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.